Chapter 348. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had misunderstood her, Little Orange thought about it, then gritted her teeth and said, "Yes, you guessed right. Ren Xiaoyao, I do want to pee. So please, can you hide behind the carriage?" Zhang Xiaohua was startled, then smiled, revealing her white teeth. "Of course, I'll go right now." Then she jumped off the carriage and walked to the other side. After Zhang Xiaohua left, Little Orange gently placed Miss Nie's hand on her body, then slowly and painstakingly got off the carriage. She looked behind the carriage and said, "Ren Xiaoyao, you're not allowed to peek." OMG, Zhang Xiaohua almost fell. She thought, do I have to do this? If I wanted to look, I could have just used my divine sense. Why would I need to peek? Plus, do you think I don't know what you're doing? As expected, Little Orange carefully walked and looked behind her. She walked to the place where the Vice Hall Master had fallen off his horse last night. She looked left and right and saw several corpses lying there. Because of the fear last night, no one saw the Vice Hall Master's face clearly. Little Orange had no choice but to crouch down and search the corpses one by one. Soon, she found a small brocade box from one of the corpses. Little Orange was overjoyed and looked behind her again. She didn't see Zhang Xiaohua peeking. Little Orange stood up and put away the brocade box. She was about to go back, but her brows furrowed slightly, and she finally walked behind a small tree with a red face. She only came out after a while. After she left, some strange sounds entered Zhang Xiaohua's ears. Zhang Xiaohua also blushed a bit and muttered in her heart, "Io, luckily I knew what she was going to do, so I didn't release my divine sense. Otherwise." However, Zhang Xiaohua now had a good impression of this bold and scheming little girl. She no longer criticized her like she did when they first met. When Little Orange got onto the carriage, she called for Zhang Xiaohua to come out. Zhang Xiaohua tactfully didn't ask anything. She got onto the carriage, shook the reins and imitated the coachman, shouting, "Hiya!" The black horse was very obedient. It exerted force with its 4 hooves and slowly pulled the carriage forward. However, the many corpses in the field also tested Zhang Xiaohua's skills. There were several times when she had to get out of the car and drag the corpses to the side. Huan Huan had been standing quietly by the side of the road, occasionally eating the weeds on the side of the road. Now that it saw Zhang Xiaohua driving over, it also screamed happily and followed her. There was no need for Zhang Xiaohua to call out to it. Little Orange, who was in the carriage, was very surprised. She originally wanted to ask out of curiosity, but looking at the young miss lying on the sickbed next to her, how could she still be in the mood? At this time, Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Little Orange, do you think we should go forward or back?" Little Orange said, "Of course we're going forward, but I remember that there's a village not too far behind us. Maybe there's a doctor there. Let's go forward. Our escorts are supposed to go forward. Maybe we'll meet them after we walk for a while." Little Orange said it like it was real. In fact, she had neglected one point. Zhang Xiaohua had seen their 8 escorts before. If Zhang Xiaohua had looked carefully at the corpses, she would definitely have seen them at the scene. How could there be an extra bodyguard? But in Little Orange's eyes, Zhang Xiaohua was just a young man from the countryside. How could he be so scheming? So she directly ignored him. Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to expose her lie. In his heart, he had only met these 2 girls by chance. It was just in life, or on this journey. He wouldn't have any interactions with them at all. All he had to do was help them drive the carriage to the town ahead. At most, he would help them find an escort agency and let a real escort them to where they were supposed to go. "I'm not a curious baby, so why should I care about you?" It didn't take long for them to reach the main road. Zhang Xiaohua didn't care about the 2 maidservants in the carriage and focused on driving the carriage. Although he hadn't really driven a carriage before, the horses he used to pull the carriage were trained by others. They were much better than ordinary horses, so he didn't have to worry too much about them. Moreover, the carriage didn't go very fast, so naturally, it became more and more convenient for him. Sitting in the carriage, Little Orange could feel that the carriage wasn't going very fast. Although she was burning with anxiety, she didn't want to rush them. It wasn't until it was almost noon that they arrived at a slightly larger town. The first thing Zhang Xiaohua did when he entered the town was to find out if there were any escort agencies or medical centers in the town. Unfortunately, the town was too small, so no escort agencies were interested in this place. Fortunately, there were still medical centers around. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent and chose the largest one to drive the carriage over. Miss Nie's wrist was broken, so Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to move it too much. He wanted to get the doctor to take a look at her in the carriage, but the doctor only sat in the hall and didn't come out. He only asked them to send the patient over. Later, Little Orange had to secretly bribe him with some silver before he was willing to go out to see the patient. Zhang Xiaohua was depressed. Everyone said that doctors should treat their patients with care, but why was this doctor like this? Because he had received the silver, the doctor was especially meticulous. After examining her, he frowned slightly. Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "Is there a problem?" The doctor was puzzled and said, "From the way you bandaged her and the medicine you applied, they're all excellent. It looks like you're only slightly worse than me. So how did you get a fever and faint?" Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She smiled and said, "I just met a wandering doctor on the side of the road and treated him carelessly. I only rushed over because I didn't know that you're a skilled doctor." The doctor was very pleased and said with a smile, "I was wondering why it was like this. It turns out that you didn't treat her properly and didn't use any professional tools to fix her wrist. This is simple and is just a small test for me. Please wait a moment." The doctor was also very professional. Not long after, he fixed Miss Nie's wrist and wrote a prescription with a stroke of his pen. He then asked the medical center staff to brew the medicine according to the prescription. Little Orange was still worried, so he carefully read the prescription before agreeing to brew the medicine. After the medicine was brewed, Little Orange carefully fed it to Miss Nie. Zhang Xiaohua carried a lot of medicine bags and put them on the carriage before driving the carriage away from the medical center. When they reached the side of the road, Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Little Orange, do you think we should continue to walk forward?" Or, he didn't finish his sentence and wanted to let Little Orange choose to go forward. However, Little Orange had his own ideas and said with difficulty, "Ren Xiaoyao, can I trouble you to find an inn first? It's not good for Miss Nie's health if she continues to travel like this." Zhang Xiaohua sighed. Why didn't he know that patients needed rest the most? However, he was also in a hurry to go home. His family in the Guozhuang house hadn't heard from him for 4 years. His mother must be missing him every day. He just wanted to hurry back. Forget it. Anyway, a few days won't make a difference. I'll wait until I find an escort agency. After making up his mind, Zhang Xiaohua wanted to drive the carriage to find an inn. However, just as he was about to start the carriage, Zhang Xiaohua thought of something. He turned around and asked, "Little Orange, I have an idea. Do you think it'll work?" Little Orange said, "What is it? Just say it." "Here's the thing. I saw so many corpses in front of your carriage this morning. You said that someone wanted to kill you and steal your things. Do you think they will send people to chase you again?" "That's right." Little Orange heard this and his expression changed greatly. He said, "Ren Xiaoyao, you're right. They will definitely send people to kill us again. What do you think we should do?" Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. "How would I know? This has nothing to do with me at all. I don't know where you guys are from, or where the people who want to kill you are from. I can't even tell who's good and who's evil." After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Since they can chase after you, I'm sure they must have some clues. Maybe it's the carriage, or maybe it's your looks. Looks can't be changed, but carriages can be changed. Don't you think so?" "That's right, Ren Xiaoyao. You're so smart. Are you really a farmer in the countryside?" Little Orange clapped his hands and praised him. Zhang Xiaohua shook his head proudly and thought to himself, "What do you mean by that?" Following that, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Let's get out of this town first. Once we're out, you guys can wait here. I'll come back and find a carriage to pick you guys up. What do you think?" Of course, Little Orange would follow Zhang Xiaohua's lead. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua drove the carriage onto the main road. After traveling for a while, they turned into a secluded area. Zhang Xiaohua tied the black horse to a tree and prepared to ride the deer back to town. At this moment, Little Orange stuck his head out of the carriage and called out, "Ren Xiaoyao, you." Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously, "Is there something else?" Little Orange looked at him eagerly and asked, You won't not come back, right?" Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a bad idea at all. Of course, this was just a thought. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't that despicable. With a look of disdain, he snapped his fingers and said, "Look, do I look like that kind of person? No matter what, I've studied the three-character classic for a few months." Little Orange almost fell off the carriage. But after a while, seeing that Zhang Xiaohua still hadn't moved, Little Orange felt strange again and asked, "Why aren't you going yet? Don't tell me you're angry with me for saying that?" Zhang Xiaohua looked at her from head to toe as if he didn't know her. He asked curiously, "Is this still the smart Little Orange? Doesn't Little Orange know that buying a carriage costs money? This carriage is what you want. You don't want the salary I give you to drive the carriage. Do you want me to pay for the carriage as well?" Little Orange blushed and quickly shrank back into the carriage. After a while, she came out with a small green pouch in her hand. She handed it to Zhang Xiaohua and said, "Ren Xiaoyao, this is my pouch. There's some money inside. Take it." Zhang Xiaohua took the pouch and opened it to take a look. He couldn't help but cry out, "Aya, you guys are really rich. There's even gold inside." After saying that, he took out a small piece of gold from the pouch and looked at it fondly. Looking at Zhang Xiaohua's greedy look, Little Orange didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said, "Take the flowers first. When it's not enough, come find me. Miss has more." -3. Chapter 349. Is that so? Zhang Xiaohua looked at Little Orange maliciously and said, "Aren't you afraid that I will rob you?" Ah. Little Orange's face was also full of fear. She trembled and said, "Young master, may I ask, are you going to rape me?" Zhang Xiaohua's face immediately turned red. She slapped the head of the deer and ran away. I was teased. I was teased. Zhang Xiaohua thought as she ran away. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua gradually disappear into the distance, Little Orange's mouth revealed a smile. But when she looked at the young miss next to her, her face became a little worried. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's voice came from not far away. "Little Orange, tidy up the things in the carriage. Wait for me to come back and rob you." "This guy," Little Orange said as she stood up. Yes, there were a lot of things in this luxurious carriage. There was still a long way to the young Mrs. Villa. If she didn't tidy it up properly, what would she use in the future? Fortunately, Little Orange was a servant girl. Tidying up was her job. In a short while, she tidied up everything neatly and waited for Zhang Xiaohua's carriage to pick her up. But after waiting for a long time, there was still no sign of her. Little Orange couldn't help but feel her heart beat faster. Could it be that her good eye for people was not accurate? Could it be that this seemingly honest young man from the countryside took the money and ran away? Moreover, when she thought of the assassin that could appear at any time, her heart was in her throat. Just as Little Orange was about to get out of the carriage and draw circles on the ground to curse Zhang Xiaohua, he heard the sound of a carriage not far away. He looked up and saw a worn-out carriage being pulled by Huan Huan, the four odd beasts. Gila, Gila, the carriage was slowly moving towards them. In an instant, the cold of early winter disappeared. Little Orange had the urge to jump up. Huan Huan pulled the carriage very slowly, as if it was very unwilling. Zhang Xiaohua was not in a hurry. She sat cross-legged and let it do as it wished. When they arrived, Zhang Xiaohua jumped down from the carriage and smiled. "Little Orange, you must have been waiting for a long time?" "Yeah, you're dead. Where did you go?" Little Orange immediately realized that something was wrong and quickly changed his words. He looked down at the ground and squinted at Zhang Xiaohua. "What took you so long?" Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to hear anything and said embarrassedly, "I'm not very familiar with this place, so I asked a few people. Moreover, there are no places that sell carriages, so I had to look for several places before I found a seller and bought this carriage. Look, isn't it very inconspicuous?" Little Orange was still thinking about its slip of the tongue and did not notice this. It just nodded randomly. Zhang Xiaohua continued, "Besides, Huan Huan is supposed to pull firewood. Now that it's pulling the cart, it's not happy. That's why it's walking a little slow." "Oh, is that so? Huan Huan? Who is Huan Huan?" Little Orange answered casually, but suddenly froze. Huan Huan, who was beside it, did not agree. It hissed in a low voice and said, "Please, I've already condescended to pull your cart, but you don't even know my name?" Alas, this animal was just like a human. It had just left Songning town, and it was already tired of pulling carriages. Little Orange finally understood that this animal's name was Huan Huan. If it was any other day, it would have jumped over to look at it. However, last night's incident seemed to be a catalyst that made her mature. He smiled and said, "Then I'll have to trouble your mount. When we go back, I'll find something it likes to eat as compensation." Zhang Xiaohua heard this and said happily, "That's great. Huan Huan, aren't you going to thank Little Orange?" Huan Huan shook its head and wagged its tail. It stuck out its big head and stuck out its big red tongue to lick Little Orange's face. Little Orange was scared and quickly hid. Huan Huan hissed in a low voice and said, "This girl doesn't give me any face." Zhang Xiaohua saw this and laughed in her heart. She said, "Also, when I was looking for a carriage, I found a decent inn. I used the money you gave me to reserve a small courtyard. We can go there later." Little Orange heard this and was very happy. He praised, "Ren Xiaoyao, you're so thoughtful. Miss will probably need to recuperate for a while. It won't do if she doesn't have a secluded courtyard." What do you mean she needs to recuperate for a while?" Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised and disappointed. Little Orange said curiously, "It takes 100 days to recover from a serious injury. How can she not recuperate?" She did not hold back and directly treated Zhang Xiaohua as one of her own. However, she did not think that Zhang Xiaohua had something to do. Then okay. Zhang Xiaohua could only be speechless. Then, he took out a package from the small carriage and threw it to Little Orange. He said, "You change first and then help your miss change. If you need my help, I don't mind." Little Orange was stunned. He reached out and took the package that was not heavy. When he opened it, he saw that it was some clothes that were not too shabby. She immediately understood what Zhang Xiaohua meant. She and her miss were dressed in this luxurious carriage. If they were to sit in a small carriage, wouldn't it be more obvious? It was better to change to a carriage. In addition, she had just shown her face at the medical hall. If she did not change her clothes and was seen by others, they would know that she had just been to the medical hall. If an assassin came, he would definitely ask around and find out. Why didn't she think of this? Little Orange could not help but pat her forehead. Usually, she was the smart one in the manor. Otherwise, her miss would not have brought her out. Why was it that in front of this Ren Xiaoyao, her cleverness disappeared? With that thought in mind, she spat at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "You're self-reliant and have plenty of food and clothes." After saying this, she turned around and entered the carriage. There was a rustling sound from inside. Not long after, a simple peasant girl appeared. However, she encountered difficulties when she helped her miss change her clothes. First, her miss was unconscious and could not cooperate at all. Second, her wrists were fixed with splints and could not be moved carelessly. Little Orange tried a few times, but in the end, she still could not help her miss change her clothes. At this time, she could not help but grit her teeth and secretly said, "Sigh, I really have to ask him for help. This country boy is too lucky." Little Orange raised her head from the carriage and said, "Ren Xiaoyao, can you come up and help?" Damn, Zhang Xiaohua almost fell down. Just now, she was just joking. Did he really need her help? Although she did not know how the servants of the rich young masters served their young masters and young mistresses, but helping the young mistress change her clothes should be the most basic skill. Moreover, she heard that when the rich young masters were drunk, their servants would help them bathe and dress them. Just thinking about it made her drool. Was this Little Orange a fake? Did she not know how to dress people? Of course, Zhang Xiaohua was not stupid enough to think that Little Orange wanted him to help her dress. However, Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled and was about to walk over. Little Orange frowned and shouted, "But, Ren Xiaoyao, you have to close your eyes." "Close my eyes? Then how can I help?" Zhang Xiaohua understood. This help was still very thought-provoking. Very naturally, Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Does your miss not wear underwear?" "Bah!" Little Orange glared and scolded, "You don't wear underwear. Why are you talking nonsense? If someone else heard you, wouldn't it damage my miss reputation? Even if I don't wear underwear, you won't know." Zhang Xiaohua thought viciously. Even if she wears underwear, if a man like you sees it, my miss reputation will be ruined. So even if I ask for your help, you can't look. Little Orange explained. "So troublesome. But there's no one around. What are you afraid of?" Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. Miss always told us that God is watching what we do. No matter what you do, you don't have to care if there's anyone around, or if anyone is looking. The most important thing is to stay true to your heart. It's best to have a clear conscience. Tongue. It was as if a spark had ignited something in Zhang Xiaohua's heart. At that moment, Zhang Xiaohua's state of mind was growing at a perceptible speed. That's right, when she saw Little Orange and the others being hunted down last night, Zhang Xiaohua felt extremely repulsed. If it wasn't for something in her heart, or if it wasn't for the fact that the bad guys left without killing anyone, Zhang Xiaohua might not have done anything. This was all because Zhang Xiaohua was afraid of getting into trouble and delaying her journey. But now, Little Orange's words reminded her. If she really didn't do anything last night, how could she face her own conscience? She was afraid that many times in the future, she would think about this matter and ask herself, that night, why didn't I do anything? I wonder what happened to those two pitiful girls in the end? Sigh, luckily, I did do something last night, and I did my best. Zhang Xiaohua thought to himself with a smile. At this moment, he felt that his cultivation that had been loosening up had improved again. What are you laughing at? Forget it, you should just stay aside. I'll do it myself. Little Orange saw Zhang Xiaohua suddenly smile and thought that he had thought of something. She blushed and said angrily, "Io, Little Orange, you're saying that it's a misunderstanding?" Zhang Xiaohua realized that Little Orange had misunderstood and quickly explained. "I heard you say that your miss was scolding you, and I thought of something that a friend of mine from the academy told me." Is that true? Don't lie to me." Little Orange did not believe her at all. "It's true. I once knew a scholar who loved to read books. He read a lot of miscellaneous journals, travelogues, supernatural novels, and so on. But one day, he suddenly wanted to write a book of his own. So he started writing excitedly. Who would have thought that after writing for almost 10 months and writing 2 million words, not many people would read it? But he didn't know how to revise it or change to a new topic. So one day, I asked him, 'You've worked so hard for so long, but no one applauded you. So what's the point of doing so?' Can you guess what he said? What did he say? Could it be that he is as smart as my miss? How can you say something so philosophical?" Zhang Xiaohua clapped and praised, "Yes, that's right." That scholar smiled and said, "No matter what others think, I have kept my heart and wrote down the story that I wanted to tell. I feel that it does not lose to any book, and it is their loss if they don't read it." See, isn't he as smart as your miss? That's true. Such an amazing person. I wonder when I can meet him? Little Orange looked forward to it. Zhang Xiaohua looked into the distance, as if he had seen through endless time and space, and smiled. "You will, that day will come." -3. Chapter 350. Although Little Orange was worried that her young miss would be taken advantage of by Zhang Xiaohua, she couldn't do it on her own. She was also afraid of being hunted down by bad people, so she could only hold her nose and ask Zhang Xiaohua for help. Thankfully, Zhang Xiaohua was a gentleman. She closed her eyes and even wrapped her hands with clothes as if it was something she really needed to do. She helped Little Orange support Miss Nia and successfully changed into the farmer's clothes. After changing, Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes and couldn't help but praise, "Little Orange, look at your young miss. She's wearing farmer's clothes and looks even more authentic than me, an authentic farmer's child. Could it be that your family is a landowner in the countryside?" Hey, Little Orange almost spat on Zhang Xiaohua's face again. This guy looks ordinary and unattractive. He was still acting like a serious nerd in the morning. How did he become so glib in just one morning? She actually couldn't help but want to hit him. Sigh, let's drink some water first. We'll talk again when you're hydrated. Little Orange looked at Zhang Xiaohua exasperatedly. She picked up the water skin from the carriage and drank several mouthfuls in succession. After she finished, she thought for a moment and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua, saying, "Ren Xiaoyao, you've been busy all morning and didn't even drink a sip of water. You must be tired. You should drink some too." Zhang Xiaohua took it with a smile, but as soon as she handed it over, Little Orange regretted it. What? She drank from the waterskin's mouth just now. Now, if Zhang Xiaohua also drank from his mouth like her, wouldn't that be? Thinking of this, Little Orange's face flushed red. Unfortunately, The water skin was already in Zhang Xiaohua's hands. Even if she wanted to take it back, she didn't have a good reason. She just needed to lower her head, look sideways, and glance at it from time to time. Zhang Xiaohua saw her strange behavior and did not understand at first. But when he was about to drink, he felt Little Orange's body tremble slightly. He looked at the water bag and immediately understood. He smiled and said, "I'm not thirsty. I'm not tired. I'm working hard for Little Orange in Mississippi. My heart is sweet." Then, he threw the water bag back into the carriage and said, "This water bag belongs to someone else. Let's not take it." When Little Orange saw that Zhang Xiaohua did not drink any water, he could not help but heave a sigh of relief. But immediately, a trace of disappointment appeared in his heart. Then, with Zhang Xiaohua's help, Little Orange carefully carried his miss onto the worn-out carriage. Actually, Zhang Xiaohua thought that he could do it by himself. Who knew that this Little Orange was so loyal? He was afraid that his miss would be bullied and insisted on doing it himself. So, Zhang Xiaohua could only help hold his miss's injured arm. Sigh, he had no choice. Zhang Xiaohua put on some clothes on his arm and went to help. After moving the most important Miss Nia onto the worn-out carriage, the rest of the things were naturally taken by Zhang Xiaohua. This time, Little Orange did not stop him at all. The luxurious carriage was not too big, but there were a lot of things inside. It was hard for Little Orange to clean it up so well. It almost filled up all the extra space in the worn-out carriage. Zhang Xiaohua looked at it and could not help but frown. How could this be? It did not look like something from a country family. Zhang Xiaohua told her concerns to Little Orange. Little Orange also felt that it was inappropriate. But looking at these things, he could not bear to throw this away or throw that away. He wanted to use this and that too. He was really a money grubber just like Zhang Xiaohua. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to coax and scare him to throw a small portion of the things that were not too valuable and took up a lot of space back into the luxurious carriage. As for the rest, she covered it with a worn-out felt cloth to hide it. Zhang Xiaohua led the black horse and drove the luxurious carriage onto the main road. She walked forward a bit, looked around, and saw that there was no one around. Then, she slapped the black horse's butt. The black horse cried out in pain and galloped forward. Zhang Xiaohua easily jumped down from the carriage and ran back. Little Orange sat in the small and narrow roof of the worn-out carriage and felt extremely uncomfortable. When he saw Zhang Xiaohua coming back, he asked, "Ren Xiaoyao, why didn't you find a slightly bigger carriage?" Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, "This is already not bad. This town isn't big, so there aren't any places that specialize in selling carriages. Besides, we're just farmers in the countryside now. If the carriage is bigger, it won't look like it." Little Orange muttered, "I know the reason. I'm just afraid that Miss won't be used to it when she wakes up and will blame me. Oh right, I even threw Miss's carriage away. Do you think Miss will scold me?" After Miss Nia finished taking the medicine from the medical hall, her complexion looked better and her fever gradually subsided. Therefore, Little Orange's heart, which had been on edge all this time, finally returned to its original position. He also had the leisure to think about other things. Zhang Xiaohua looked at Little Orange strangely and said, "You're your Miss maidservant." "I'm not. How would I know your Miss temper? Who knows if she'll blame you or not?" All right, forget it. Hurry up and drive the carriage. Don't let the bad guys catch up to us." In fact, Zhang Xiaohua knew very well that the news of all the bad guys being wiped out would probably only be sent back this afternoon. The next time they would send someone over would probably be tomorrow. That was not including the time they would have to study it. Therefore, he had plenty of time to spare. However, since Little Orange was urging him, he did not say anything else. He walked in front of the David's deer and patted its head affectionately. The David's deer slowly pulled the cart forward while Zhang Xiaohua walked beside the David's deer. The inn Zhang Xiaohua found was not big or new. It was located in a rather remote part of town. She didn't know what the innkeeper was thinking. Why would anyone come to a place like this? However, looking at the innkeeper's indifferent attitude when he saw the customers, she could probably guess the reason. The courtyard Zhang Xiaohua rented was not inside the inn but next to it. It was a very small courtyard that was similar to the one Ji Xiaohua lived in. The shabby appearance of the courtyard was also similar. Presumably, a family used to live there. The courtyard had its own entrance and a small door that was connected to the inn. Zhang Xiaohua led the carriage to the courtyard under the guidance of a waiter. Then Zhang Xiaohua gave the waiter a few copper coins and sent him away. The waiter was very happy when he received the copper coins. It seemed like there weren't many people who tipped him, which made Zhang Xiaohua feel very regretful. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have tipped him. There were 3 rooms in this small courtyard. Little Orange carefully tidied up the largest one before carrying Miss Nia onto the bed with Zhang Xiaohua's help. Before Zhang Xiaohua could say anything, Little Orange kicked him out and said nicely, "Miss Nia's boudoir is not for trespassers." Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This little girl didn't regard herself as an outsider at all. She couldn't wait to get rid of this big burden so she could go on her way. Who would want to provoke her? Of course, she was just thinking about it. Since she had already helped to this extent, there was a saying from ancient times. If you do a good deed to the end, send Buddha to the Western paradise. 1 or 2 more days wouldn't make much of a difference. If she just gave up now, would she still be human? Looking at Little Orange's appearance, Zhang Xiaohua swallowed the words she wanted to say. She turned around and went out. She untied Huan Huan from the carriage and casually threw the broken carriage in a corner. Then, she found a small room nearby and pushed the door open. This small room was clean and tidy, but it was a small town after all. The room emitted an indescribable smell of soil. Zhang Xiaohua felt very comfortable when she smelled it. She couldn't help but think of her own Guozhuang house. Didn't it have the same smell? Sigh. Zhang Xiaohua sighed. She wished she could grow wings and fly back home to Guozhuang house. But now, she had to wait for Miss Nie's body to recover. Then, Zhang Xiaohua took out a primeval stone and sat cross-legged. Just as she was about to cultivate the Carefree Heart Sutra, a thought suddenly entered her mind. Grow wings? If she could obtain the cultivation method after the ethereal steps, perhaps she could fly into the sky? Wasn't the Misty School already destroyed? When she had the opportunity, she should go to the Misty Mountain Villa to take a look. Their restriction must have some immortal Tao items. If there were some suitable cultivation methods inside, then she would be rich. Hee. Thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but reveal a trace of a smile. What would it be like to fly into the sky? That day at the tea house in Songning Town, I felt like I was flying into the sky. I flew higher and higher. That shouldn't be my divine sense. Then what could it be? Could it be my consciousness? During this period of time, I was in a hurry to return home and didn't properly comprehend what I learned that day. The comprehension of flying into the sky isn't something that can be obtained easily. Moreover, I risked the danger of my consciousness drifting away to obtain it. After thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua secretly operated her cultivation method to absorb the primeval qi while carefully comprehending what she had learned from flying into the sky. That day, Zhang Xiaohua sat in the tall building and looked down at the bustling crowd below. It was as if she was high above, looking down at the various states of the world. In an instant, her consciousness left her body and flew towards the boundless horizon. It was similar to the unity of heaven and man realm in the immortal Tao cultivation. The unity of heaven and man realm, as the name suggests, was to combine one's consciousness with the consciousness of the heavenly Tao. The boundless horizon in Zhang Xiaohua's perception was only the simplest manifestation of the heavenly Tao. The cultivation of the immortal Tao was the process of exploring, and grasping the heavenly Tao. This unity of heaven and man realm was a shortcut to integrate the essence or meaning of the heavenly Tao into one's consciousness. And the appearance of this realm was extremely rare. Even during the peak of the immortal Tao in the ancient times, there were only a few that appeared. And these few that appeared were all the outstanding cultivators of the immortal Tao. They all borrowed the moment when they glimpsed the essence of the heavenly Tao and grasped some of the rules of the heavenly Tao. From then on, they had a great improvement in their cultivation, reaching a level that ordinary cultivators could not imagine. The reason why Zhang Xiaohua was able to enter this exceptionally precious realm was not only because of the deep accumulation of his 4 years on the deserted island, but also because he had left the mortal world for a long time. When he returned, he had many feelings. It was as if there was a saying, "There is no Bodhi tree, nor is there a bright mirror. If there is nothing at first, where can there be dust?" The moment Zhang Xiaohua's clean mirror came into contact with the mortal world, everything in the world became so clear. It could not help but arouse his feelings towards the heavenly Tao. -3. Chapter 351. Of course, the appearance of the realm of being one with the world was not based on one's level of cultivation. Sometimes, when one had just entered the first layer of Qi practitioner, they might encounter it by chance. Furthermore, in this realm that cultivators yearned for even in their dreams, the amount of comprehension and benefits one could obtain was not based on one's level of cultivation. Two people with the same level of cultivation might experience a situation where one's level of cultivation made a breakthrough while the other gained nothing. With Zhang Xiaohua's current level of cultivation that was close to the edge of the sixth layer of Qi practitioner, it was truly rare for him to enter this realm by chance. However, because his level of cultivation was too low, he had never received any systematic education in this area. As a result, as soon as he entered the realm of being one with the world, he flew towards the horizon uncontrollably without comprehending the mysteries of the realm in detail. As his consciousness drifted away, some comprehensions that he was unaware of were deeply engraved into his mind. However, the greater danger was that his consciousness would expand endlessly and draw closer to the boundless heavenly way. In the end, it would dissipate into the horizon, and his body sitting in the tea house would become an idiot. As a result, although Zhang Xiaohua was unaware of the danger he was in, he could faintly sense that Ji Xiaohua's shout was of great help to him. At that time, Zhang Xiaohua's consciousness had entered the realm of being one with the world. Various mysteries of the heavenly way had opened a blurry door to him. Some indescribable things were deeply engraved into his mind. He had never been able to calm down and comprehend them. Today, in this tiny town, in a small hut, he finally had the leisure to immerse himself in the memories of that day and carefully comprehend the heavenly way that was as vast as the starry sky. That's right. Even if it was only a fledgling form of the heavenly way, it was as vast as the sea before Zhang Xiaohua. However, since he had the outline of the starry sky in his mind, didn't that mean he had a direction to comprehend it in? Wasn't this countless times better than being illusory and unfathomable? As long as he continued to comprehend it, the mysteries of the starry sky would be completely comprehended one day. Didn't that mean that the heavenly way was within his reach? At this moment, the droplet of essence in Zhang Xiaohua's dantian suddenly trembled, like the ripples of a drop of water falling into water. A black dot faintly appeared in the center of the essence. Afterwards, the essence began to tremble in a profound manner and slowly revolved. It was so slow that it was almost imperceptible. Perhaps only in this nameless town, in this inconspicuous hut, did Zhang Xiaohua truly see the essence of cultivation and take the first step into it. Meanwhile, in the tea house of Soning Town, the curtains to Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation began. After an indeterminate amount of time, perhaps an instant, or perhaps an entire afternoon, Zhang Xiaohua felt some changes in the true qi in her meridians when she was meditating. It rapidly revolved and charged towards the bottleneck of the sixth layer of qi refining. As a result, Zhang Xiaohua temporarily stopped her comprehension of the heavenly way and increased her absorption of the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The accumulated true qi finally broke through the final barrier after several collisions and created new meridians in Zhang Xiaohua's body. Zhang Xiaohua finally broke through to the sixth layer of qi refining. Zhang Xiaohua suppressed the joy in her heart and slowly circulated her true qi according to the sixth layer of the Carefree Heart Sutra. She absorbed spiritual energy from origin stones and refined it in the new meridians before flowing it into her dantian, gradually stabilizing her sixth layer of qi refining. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was comprehending the heavenly way and cultivating the Carefree Heart Sutra to a new level, Miss Nia also slowly opened her eyes in the hut next to her. Miss Nia opened her eyes and felt weak all over. She turned her neck with difficulty and examined her unfamiliar surroundings. Only then did she see Xiao Orange sleeping next to her. Miss Nia was startled and stared at Xiao Orange's clothes for a long time. If it weren't for the fact that Xiao Orange's hair was very familiar, she would have thought it was a stranger. She called out softly, but her voice was weak and hoarse. Xiao Orange's head didn't move at all, as if she was deeply asleep. Miss Nie smiled bitterly in her heart. Of course, Xiao Orange must have had a sleepless night after such a big incident last night, and she even had a high fever. She looked outside and saw that the sky had already darkened, so it should be the afternoon of the next day. Xiao Orange must have used up all her strength to drive her from the wilderness to this place by herself. With her body, it would be strange if she could still endure it. Looking at Xiao Orange's clothes, Miss Nie lowered her head and looked at herself, gratification filling her heart. This careless girl knows how to change her appearance. At that moment, pain came from her right wrist. Miss Nie couldn't help but look at her arm on the bed out of the corner of her eyes. It was actually also in a splint. Although it looked sloppy, it had fixed the broken bone in place. She had treated it simply last night, so she wasn't sure if the bones were aligned properly. With that thought, Miss Nie raised her arm worriedly and placed it in front of her chest. Her light movement immediately caused Xiao Orange, who appeared to be deeply asleep, to shiver. She lifted her head and opened her hazy eyes. Mississippi, seeing Miss Nie open her eyes, Xiao Orange's sleepiness immediately disappeared. She cried excitedly, "Miss, you scared me to death. You're finally awake." Then, she placed her hand on Miss Nie's forehead and tested it. "Miss, your head still has a bit of a fever." Seeing Xiao Orange wake up, Miss Nie smiled weakly and said, "Give me some water to drink." Xiao Orange quickly stood up and poured some water from the teapot on the table. She lifted Miss Nie's head and fed her the water. Miss Nie gulped down the entire teacup, then licked her lips and said, "What's the taste of this water? It doesn't taste good." "Oh right, Xiao Orange. Where are we?" Xiao Orange placed the teacup on the table and helped Miss Nie lie down. Then, she recounted the morning's events in detail. When Miss Nie heard about Zhang Xiaohua's appearance, a strange light flashed through her dim eyes. She said in a low voice, "Eccentric. He really is an eccentric." "What?" Xiao Orange smiled. "Miss, you're wrong this time. No matter how I look at him, he's just a normal country bumpkin who can't be normal." "Why do you say that?" Miss Nie was confused. Miss, you didn't see him. He's petty and rustic. He wants to speak like a scholar, but he can't. He's neither fish nor fowl. No matter how I look at him, I don't find it strange." "Oh? It's only been half a day, and you've already figured him out so thoroughly?" "Well, you'll know when you see him later. He's definitely not one of our people from last night." "Alas, I didn't say that he was our man last night. Last night, the man didn't show up, but he killed more than a dozen people with the legendary flying sword skill. This kind of skill can't be practiced without decades of hard work and excellent talent. It's estimated that a senior master was playing in the world and happened to meet him, so he helped him. Although this man named Ren Xiaoyao is tall, he seems to be 14 or 15 years old. Even if he practiced martial arts since he was born, he may not have such skill." "Yes, miss, I think so too. But haven't you thought about it? Why did he appear in the suburbs so early in the morning? When he saw the corpses all over the ground, he didn't panic or run away. Instead, he came up to ask you and helped you drive the carriage to this town?" "No, Mississippi. He wanted to leave, but in the end, maybe he found his conscience and stayed to help. Well, let's not talk about that for now. Then, he helped us buy clothes from the countryside, bought a broken carriage, and let our carriage and black horse go. Are these ideas something a youth from the countryside could think of? Why wouldn't it be possible? I think I can think of these things too. It doesn't mean he's a superhuman. All right, whether he's a superhuman or not, I feel that he's not a simple country bumpkin. By the way, miss, what do you think this is?" After saying that, Little Orange took out a small brocade box and handed it to Miss Nie. He said, "I sent Ren Xiaoyao away and took this from the corpses. If he's a superhuman, he would have known. Why would he fall for my trick?" Thinking of the method he used to send Zhang Xiaohua away, Little Orange's face heated up. Miss Nie looked at it and said uninterestedly, "Maybe." Miss, you don't seem very happy. Aren't you excited that you can keep the treasure? What's there to be excited about? Didn't I say that treasures are dead and people are alive? With this treasure in our hands, bad people will come looking for us sooner or later." "Ah, yes, Mississippi. Let's take it one step at a time. You should keep this treasure well. It's not safe with me. Miss Nye smiled. What's not safe about it? You should keep it. If bad people come looking for you, they'll only come looking for me. Of course, Little Orange wasn't willing to take it. He put the brocade box on Miss Nye's uninjured left hand. Miss, you should keep it well. The two of us are very safe together. Miss Nye smiled and put it in her pocket. Then, Miss Nye brought her right hand to her chest and carefully examined it. She smiled and said, the doctors here are average, but their basic skills are solid. When they put the splint on, they actually didn't open my set bone. Yes, Mississippi. You still have a fever. Shouldn't you change your medicine? Yes, let me take a look at the prescription the doctor gave this morning. Little Orange thought about it and went out. He rummaged through the small carriage and brought the prescription and herbs into the room. Miss Nye took a look and said with a smile, this prescription is a bit lacking. It's harmful to the body and can't treat my illness. Bring me the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone. I'll make some changes. Hearing this, Little Orange was a little embarrassed and said, Miss, in order to avoid being noticed, I also sat in a carriage to come to this inn. I'm not familiar with the road. I think I'd better call Ren Xiaoyao and ask him to help us. -3. Chapter 352. Miss Nye and Little Orange had completely different attitudes toward Zhang Xiaohua's identity. Miss Nye felt that Zhang Xiaohua should be an otherworldly mutant. Just the way he pretended to be deep in thought while sitting on the deer was enough to make people ponder deeply. Of course, this was also because Miss Nye knew and understood the habits of animals like the deer. If it was anyone else, they would just think this guy was a mule-riding brat. Speaking of brats, Miss Nye was a bit hesitant because of Zhang Xiaohua's age. Although Zhang Xiaohua's height was basically all grown up, his facial features weren't much different from a few years ago. It was just that the shape of his face was slightly longer, shedding the childishness of a youth and replacing it with the vitality of a youth. The youthful aura that assaulted her face all indicated that the young man in front of her was in his prime during the rainy season. This puzzled Miss Nye. How could a mutant be so young? However, Miss Nye, who had a good eye for people, could read a certain depth in Zhang Xiaohua's seemingly normal eyes that she had never seen before. This was the key to why she kept saying that Zhang Xiaohua was a mutant. However, she couldn't explain what that depth was. It's just a woman's sixth sense. Miss Nye said, You're the only one who's a woman. I'm not a woman. Little Orange pursed his lips and said in his mind, That's right. In Little Orange's eyes, wasn't it normal to wake up early in the wilderness? He heard that the farmers outside the farms worked at sunrise and went to bed at sunset. It was extremely easy for a young man in the countryside to wake up so early. Wasn't he afraid of corpses? Nonsense, he was a man. What was a man? A careless guy. As long as he was a man with a bit of courage, he shouldn't be afraid of corpses. Most importantly, if he was a mutant, how could he talk to a girl like that? Thinking about those details, Little Orange's face heated up. That guy definitely wasn't a mutant. Little Orange had already decided on Zhang Xiaohua's character. It had to be said that first impressions were truly too important. Zhang Xiaohua was a classic example. So when Little Orange was about to order Zhang Xiaohua to do something without hesitation, Miss Nye was a bit hesitant. She asked, Is this appropriate? Little Orange snickered in his heart and cursed, Miss, while you were unconscious, I wonder how many things you had that guy do. However, she also had a contemplative look on her face. After a long while, she probed, It should be possible. Young miss, look at his honest face, and the way he speaks is also amiable. Even if he's a mutant, he should be approachable. Moreover, this kind of thing that men like to do the most to help beautiful women, I guess they can't wait to do it. Bah! Miss Nye spat at Little Orange and said with a smile, I'd believe you if you said you were a beauty, but how am I? If Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense, she would know why Little Orange liked to beat him up. Xiao Juezi's face blushed and she smiled. Everyone judges a book by its cover, but they don't know how much beauty you have in your heart. Not only do I not dare to look up to you, even ordinary men cannot compare to you. Miss Nye rolled her eyes in boredom and said, Little Orange, why are you blushing? Normally, you're always so proud of yourself when you praise yourself. Why is it different now? Could it be? Little Orange's face became even more embarrassed. She rolled her eyes and changed the topic. Miss, it's really a pity to talk about this prescription. If you didn't give all the pills you brought with you to that injured heroine last time, we probably wouldn't have to go to the pharmacy to sell medicine right now. Plus, we'd have to trouble the mutant in your heart. Hearing this, Miss Nie's interest was piqued, and a trace of redness appeared on her pale face. She said in high spirits, "Speaking of which, Little Orange, you're wrong. If we didn't meet heroine Shui and help her by taking care of her for half a day, our journey would have been delayed. Think about it. If we were attacked yesterday morning or the night before, it would have been a problem whether we could have met someone to save us. Who knows, we might have been 2 corpses by now. This is the cycle of karma, 1 drink, 1 peck. It's really fated." Little Orange also nodded thoughtfully. Then, Miss Nie became even more interested. She seemed to have forgotten about her illness and continued, looking at heroine Shui's valiant appearance. "I'm so envious. Sigh, it's a pity that I'm still young. Father only wants my daughter to take over his business and doesn't want me to practice martial arts. But Father doesn't know that I've always liked to roam the Jianghu since I was young. It's a pleasure to repay kindness and revenge." Little Orange didn't want to disturb Miss Nie's mood and could only say half-heartedly, "That's right. If Miss Nie was skilled in martial arts, you wouldn't have to bring along a maid. You wouldn't have to hire those 8 bodyguards either. You could have just used Qinggong to move around. Naturally, you wouldn't have encountered such danger." Little Orange's words hit Miss Nie's soft spot. She was a little dispirited and said, "Sigh, even if I've been practicing martial arts since I was young, I might not be able to fight against 8 bodyguards right now. Do you know who that expert with the flying sword is? If I have the chance to meet him, how good would it be to have him as my master?" Then, Miss Nie's eyes turned and she said, "I wonder how that mutant's martial arts are? Miss, didn't I tell you before? His name is Ren Xiaoyao. You can just call him by his name. Why does this mutant sound so weird to me?" "Oh, right, Miss Nie, we just wanted to chat. Don't you still need to go get the medicine? Hurry up and tell me. I'll write down the prescription first. Later, I'll ask your mutant to go get the medicine for us." Miss Nie was also speechless. Although she was still sick, she was overjoyed to be out of danger. She couldn't help but chat a little more with Little Orange, tossing the matter of getting the medicine to the back of her mind. Little Orange looked up and saw that there was no writing brush, ink, paper, or inkstone in this simple inn. He had no choice but to stand up and say, "Miss, I'll go find the inn's manager and get some writing brush and ink." As soon as Little Orange got up, he looked at the sky and shouted, "Oh, Miss, it's almost dark. Are you hungry?" When he said hungry, there was a rumbling sound from their stomachs. Both of them blushed. It had been almost a day and night since the attack last night. They only drank a little water and didn't eat a single grain of rice. How could they not be hungry? Little Orange stomped his foot and said, "This Ren Xiaoyao, why didn't we see him for the whole afternoon? He must have fallen asleep. Why didn't he wake us up for lunch?" Looking at her angry and energetic appearance, she didn't look like someone who was looking for a mutant at all. On the other hand, Zhang Xiaohua in the small hut had already stabilized her 6th level of qi refining. The speed at which she absorbed the qi of heaven and earth had increased a lot, and the range of her spiritual sense had also expanded. In her spiritual sense, she had a clearer understanding of heaven and earth. At the same time, Zhang Xiaohua was absorbing as much qi as she could from the vitality stones and circulating it through her meridians to familiarize herself with the 6th level of qi. Although Little Orange came out in a huff, when he went out, he became gentle. He looked at the closed door of the small hut and walked over slowly. He raised his small hand and knocked on the door. Although Zhang Xiaohua didn't release her spiritual sense, her eyes and ears were still very sharp. At this time, she wasn't comprehending the Carefree Heart Sutra, nor was she comprehending the laws of heaven. When Little Orange came to the door, she already knew. When the knocking sound came, Zhang Xiaohua raised her voice and said, "Who is it? Please wait." Then he stood up and opened the door. When he saw Little Orange, he pretended to be surprised and said, "Oh, Little Orange, did you call me to eat?" When Little Orange saw this, he couldn't help but be angry and said, "You little brat, now you know how to eat. Why didn't you call us when you were staying at the inn earlier? Now Miss is so hungry that she's sticking to her back. Ah, your Miss is already awake? Zhang Xiaohua asked. When I put Miss down earlier, I wanted to ask you if you needed anything, but you kicked me out. How could I have the time to ask? About this? Little Orange was a little speechless. Yes, at that time Zhang Xiaohua wanted to say something, but he kicked her out first. How could he blame her now? Therefore, Little Orange quibbled. Even if you didn't say it in the hut, why didn't you say it outside? Didn't you want to see us make a fool of ourselves? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and didn't say anything. Then, he asked, has your young miss recovered from her illness? Can she eat now? Little Orange was a little worried and said, yes, Miss has woken up, but her fever hasn't subsided yet. Our Miss wrote a prescription herself, so I'll have to trouble you to go to the pharmacy and get some medicine for her. Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised and said, your Miss knows how to write a prescription herself? Of course, my master is, Little Orange said proudly, but he knew he had misspoken, so he quickly shut up and said perfunctorily, our Miss is very smart. These are just minor illnesses, so she'll be fine with just a dose of medicine. Unlike the doctors in town who have been taking medicine for almost a day, their fever hasn't subsided yet. Is that so? Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and said, then what medicine do you need me to get? Oh, go to the inn and get some brush and ink. When Miss tells me, I'll write it down for you. When Zhang Xiaohua heard that, she nodded and turned around to leave. Also, Little Orange added, don't forget, it's getting late, so it's time for dinner. Zhang Xiaohua chuckled. How could he not know? In order to cover his tracks, Zhang Xiaohua did not ask the waiter to send the food over. Instead, he brought it back in a food box. The inn in town was also very simple, and there were only a few types of food available. Zhang Xiaohua took the food box, brush, ink, and other things to the cottage where Little Orange and the others were staying. He gently knocked on the door, and Little Orange happily opened it. Just as Zhang Xiaohua was about to pass the things to him and go back into the cottage, he heard a soft and hoarse voice from inside. Heroine, please come in too. When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, he was shocked. Please add it to your collection. Please tip it. Thank you. -3. Chapter 353. Hero. Zhang Xiaohua was a little puzzled and a little surprised. It was impossible for this girl to see him using a flying sword. She also did not see him using any martial arts such as Qinggong. Why did she call him a hero? Hearing Mrs. Greeting, Little Orange flashed and invited Zhang Xiaohua in. Zhang Xiaohua entered the room and put the food box, pen, ink, and other things on the table. At this time, the room was already lit with candles. The light of dusk and the dim light made the whole room not clear. Miss Nye was nestled on the Kong with her back on the thick quilt. Her upper body was slightly raised, and her lacquered eyes stared at Zhang Xiaohua without blinking. Zhang Xiaohua coughed and said, Miss, did you recognize the wrong person? My name is Ren Xiaoyao. I'm not a hero. Little Orange heard and hurried over to introduce. By the way, Ren Xiaoyao, I haven't introduced my family's miss to you. Her surname is Nye. Zhang Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, so it's Miss Nye. I heard from Little Orange that Miss Nye's health is still not good. Do you need to get medicine? Miss Nye nodded and said, my surname is Nye, and my full name is Nye Qianyu. If you don't mind, you can call me Little Yu or Little Qian. Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose helplessly and said, Miss Nye is too polite. I'd better call you Miss Nye. I'm just a country bumpkin with little experience. You're a girl from a big family, so I don't dare to be so close to you. Zhang Xiaohua kept saying, afraid that Nye Qianyu would put the hat of a hero on him. But the more humble he was, the more Nye Qianyu felt that this person had the attitude of a master. Nye Qianyu said, hero. Just as she opened her mouth, Zhang Xiaohua waved his hand and said, Miss Nye, you'd better call me Ren Xiaoyao. This hero makes my hair stand on end. I suddenly thought of the pile of corpses in the morning. I guess that was the masterpiece of a hero. Nye Qianyu thought for a moment and said, if that's the case, don't be angry. I'll call you by your name. Imichim, that's great. Miss Nye, you don't have to be so polite. I'm not some hero. Ren Xiaoyao, I think Little Orange has already thanked you in the morning, but I still want to thank you in person now. Thank you for lending a helping hand when we were in danger. I will never forget this kindness. When I return to the villa, I will definitely report it to my father and give the hero. Oh, give you a big reward. Upon hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua had a strange expression on her face. She smiled and said, Miss Nye, you're being too polite again. I was just passing by. It was a piece of cake for me to bring you and Little Orange to this town. So how could I owe you a favor? If you think highly of me, just give me some gold and silver. I don't dare to covet your rewards. Well, Nye Qinyu looked embarrassed and said, I didn't bring any extra gold and silver with me when I came out. If we return to the villa, I can still take it out. But now, I'm just saying it without any evidence. Please don't laugh at me. Zhang Xiaohua laughed in her heart, but she didn't say it out loud. She pretended to be surprised and said, I see. Miss Nye, Little Orange gave me a lot of money earlier. I bought your carriage, medicine, and paid for the inn. There's still a lot left. You don't know, right? I'll give it to you now. Nye Qinyu's eyes flashed with surprise. She thought to herself, that counts as money? Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was about to take something out of her pocket, she quickly stopped her and said, Ren Xiaoyao, there's no need to take it out. You should keep the money. Don't you still need to buy medicine later? We'll need money on the way. I'll have Little Orange give you some later. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said, All right then, Miss Nye. This humble one is just a country bumpkin and has never seen money before. Little Orange has already given this humble one a lot of money. When this humble one leaves, you can just give this humble one a little bit. If it's too much, this humble one won't be able to accept it. Leave. Miss Nye and Little Orange both called out in a low voice. Miss Nye looked at Little Orange and asked Zhang Xiaohua, Ren Xiaoyao, from what you said, are you leaving soon? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, That's right, Miss Nye. I still have my own matters to attend to. After I escort you to a bigger town, I'll find an escort agency and an escort. Naturally, I'll get them to escort you home. How can I escort you home? Is that so? Miss Nye and Little Orange looked at each other with disappointment in their eyes. Yes, they were wrong. They had always thought that since Zhang Xiaohua had lent a helping hand and brought them back to town from the wilderness, she would definitely protect them all the way and escort them safely back home. But who knew that she didn't have that intention at all? Zhang Xiaohua didn't seem to notice their disappointment and only said, Unfortunately, this town is still too small and doesn't even have an escort agency. So, I can only send you two back. Ren Xiaoyao, can you send us back to the mountain villa? Little Orange bit her lip and asked in disappointment. However, Zhang Xiaohua still refused and said, Little Orange, it's not that I don't want to, but I really don't have the ability to escort you two back. Actually, when I saw the ground full of corpses this morning, I was scared out of my wits. Wasn't that because I didn't want you to laugh at me? That's why I pretended to be indifferent. Didn't you hear that I kept dropping my satchel? That was just to cover up my fear. I think, Miss Nye, you two must have encountered some enemies or robbers. Even if I were to escort you back, I wouldn't be able to ensure your safety, so I might as well leave it to the professionals. Besides, I really have an extremely important matter to attend to. I can't afford to be delayed at all. My heart is burning with anxiety while accompanying the two of you. When Nye Qinyu heard this, she said indifferently, If the hero is in a hurry, just leave us behind. Our lives are just a bunch of shepherd's purse that can be harvested by others. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Miss Nye, don't try to provoke me. The teacher said that if you want to help Buddha, you have to help him all the way to the west. Even though I'm not that talented, I have to send you all the way to India. Well, you'd better quickly write down the prescription for me and eat quickly. If you don't give me the prescription, the pharmacy outside will be closed soon. Hearing Zhang Xiaohua's nonsensical analogy, Nye Qinyu, who had a straight face, also laughed out loud. She was born with a precious jade in her mouth and was doted on in the villa. This time, she came out because she was stubborn and refused the arrangement of her family. She wanted to rely on her own ability to do something. Now that she encountered a setback, she was already bitter in her heart. Moreover, she was rejected by Zhang Xiaohua. She made up her mind. It was just a life anyway. Now that she heard Zhang Xiaohua's words, she could only take this opportunity to get out of the embarrassing situation. In the small room, the situation was also eased. Therefore, Nie Qinyu dictated the prescription, and Little Orange wrote it down and handed it to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua looked at it and frowned. Little Orange wrote it very well, but if you take it to the pharmacy like this, it will definitely attract attention. Nie Qinyu's eyes lit up, but Little Orange was puzzled. It's written well, but it will attract suspicion? Why is that? Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to speak, Nie Qinyu smiled and said, Ren Xiaoyao is very careful. Since this town is very small, there must be very few people who can write well. There are almost no women who can write with such fine and beautiful handwriting. When the pharmacy staff see it, they will definitely remember it. If someone asks, they will naturally know. Then what should we do? Little Orange immediately became anxious. Then he looked at Zhang Xiaohua, and his eyes lit up. Do you know how to write? Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips and said, Didn't you hear me say that I studied the three-character classic for a few months? How can this be difficult for me? 3 months of studying the three-character classic? Nie Qinyu almost laughed out loud. Therefore, under the light of the small house, Zhang Xiaohua held an ink brush in her hand and carefully copied the prescription that Little Orange had written. Only then did she show her handwriting to the two of them. Looking at the messy handwriting of all sizes on the paper, Little Orange almost laughed out loud. Yes, any of the servants in the villa who had studied for a few days could write better than him. Nie Qinyu, on the other hand, was smiling. She couldn't help doubting her own judgment. She had been writing since she was young, so she could naturally see that this was Zhang Xiaohua's handwriting. There was no trace of falsehood. Could this young man really be a country boy, and not the hero she had imagined? Zhang Xiaohua was a little embarrassed by Little Orange's unladylike laughter. She said angrily, Little Orange, you don't have to. Even if I can't write well, it's because I haven't practiced enough. If I practice for a few more days, I may not be worse than you. Little Orange held back his laughter and said, Well, Ren Xiaoyao, if you come with us and send us to the villa, I'll teach you how to write on the way. How about that? By the time we reach the villa, your handwriting will be well-proportioned. Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips and said in a low voice, You wish? After saying that, he put away the paper with the prescription and said, Then, Miss Nie, please eat first. I'll be right back. Nie Qinyu nodded and said, Thank you. She couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Zhang Xiaohua clasped her hands, tidied up the brush and ink on the table and left. After Zhang Xiaohua left, Little Orange said with a smile, Miss, did you see that? I told you that Ren Xiaoyao was just a boy from the countryside. I was right. Sigh, maybe I made a mistake, but I keep feeling that something is not right. He is only a teenager of 14 or 15 years old. If he was a child from the countryside, how could he be so calm? Moreover, looking at him, he seems to be going on a long journey. Do you think his family will be at ease with him going on a journey alone? Won't they ask someone to take care of him? I remember that the children outside the village need someone to take care of them when they leave their relatives. Little Orange said disapprovingly, He didn't say where he's going. I guess it's somewhere nearby. Besides, I heard that there are many brothers in the countryside. He's so tall. Maybe he's the eldest in the family. He's been taking care of his younger brothers and sisters since he was young. Of course, he knows how to take care of himself. Miss, you should eat first and have a good rest. It's his loss if he doesn't send us. Can't we find a bodyguard? Nie Qinyu didn't answer. She seemed to be thinking about something. Even when Little Orange was feeding her, she was absent-minded. Suddenly, she patted the quilt with her left hand and said, Alas, I finally understand. I was almost fooled by this boy. Her words were so sudden that Little Orange was so shocked that he almost dropped the bowl of soup in his hand. Please vote for me. Thank you. -3. Chapter 354. Zhang Xiaohua returned the innkeeper's brush, ink, and other items and went to the pharmacy in high spirits to get some medicine. Little did she know that she had already given herself away in front of the innkeeper. Although the sky had darkened and smoke was rising from all over the place, many shops were still lit up and open to welcome customers. The pharmacy was also open, so Zhang Xiaohua naturally did not go to the pharmacy she had visited earlier. She just went to a random pharmacy. The shop assistant was not very busy. When he picked up the prescription that Zhang Xiaohua handed over, he only frowned slightly but did not seem surprised at all. In this town, although there were people who came to get medicine with a neat prescription written by a doctor, most of them were like Zhang Xiaohua, who hired someone else or copied other people's prescriptions to get medicine. Zhang Xiaohua's crab-like handwriting could only help the shop assistant gain some experience and did not do anything else. Zhang Xiaohua took the medicine brewed by the shop assistant and paid for it. She casually threw her calligraphy into the trash in the shop. At this moment, Nie Qinyu explained to the confused Little Orange with a smile, "Little Orange, blame me for teaching you to pay more attention to details. You should know that details determine success or failure. Didn't you see that Ren Xiaoyao kept saying that he had only learned the 3-character classic for 3 months? But he didn't know that it was his handwriting that gave him away." "Is that so?" "Miss, I think his handwriting is really not good. Even if he copied your handwriting, it was extremely ugly. Could you tell that he was faking it?" "No, those words are his true level of handwriting. But it's precisely because he didn't fake it that I could tell." "Oh, miss, don't keep me in suspense. Where are the flaws? Tell me quickly." Nie Qinyu was still unhurried as she said, "Do you still remember what my father said when he evaluated the calligraphy of famous masters?" Little Orange thought for a moment and said, "In my impression, it's nothing more than that. The words are just like the person, round and smooth." Nie Qinyu couldn't help but laugh out loud. She mocked, round and smooth, and even plump and charming. Little Orange begged, "What do you think?" When father praises people, he usually says that it's thick and thin, dense and natural, simple and clumsy or delicate, square or round and soft, reserved or ostentatious. The strokes of the brush are like floating clouds, swift and fierce like a dragon, strong and round, powerful, and so on. Little Orange still didn't understand. She looked at her mistress and said, "Could it be that Ren Xiaoyao's writing skills have so many advantages? Why can't I tell?" "Bah." Nie Qinyu spat at Little Orange and said, "How can his handwriting have so many merits? It's just one spot." "Eh?" Little Orange asked curiously, "That crab handwriting has a great advantage." "Yeah," Nie Qinyu said thoughtfully. "Strong and powerful. The force of his strokes penetrates the bottom of the paper. I heard from my father that most of the people in Jianghu are uneducated. They don't practice calligraphy, but when they write, they often inadvertently use their inner strength. Even a real calligrapher can't compare with them. Do you think Ren Xiaoyao is like that?" He couldn't help but praise Nie Qinyu. She was really an expert at such a young age. Although Zhang Xiaohua was enlightened by Shuawen Jiezi and read countless books about herbs in a short period of time, practicing calligraphy was the most important thing. He didn't have time to practice calligraphy. He didn't even know the strokes of most words, let alone study calligraphy. Of course, his handwriting was extremely ugly. But after all, his body was full of genuine qi. Moreover, he had just seen a trace of heaven's way. The path of calligraphy was just a trivial skill. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how to write, but every stroke of his contained endless inner strength and a trace of heaven's way. Although Nie Qinyu was talented and understood the force of Zhang Xiaohua's strokes, she was not a master. She didn't see the natural charm of his calligraphy. But even this simple recognition was enough to confirm Nie Qinyu's thought. This guy must be a martial arts master. But then, another question popped up. How old is this young man? Because according to Nie Qinyu's limited experience, a master of Jianghu who could write with such force must have been immersed in the inner strength for decades. Only when the inner strength was used to a certain extent could one understand all the other things. Only then could one apply the inner strength to the performance of calligraphy. Generally, a master of Jianghu who was much older than Zhang Xiaohua might not be able to write with such force. Nie Qinyu was still thinking about this question when Zhang Xiaohua came back with the medicine. Zhang Xiaohua entered the room and took out the medicine that was still warm. She said, "Miss Nie, this medicine is still warm. Can it be used? If not, I'll heat it up in the kitchen." Nie Qinyu looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a smile and said, "It's okay. This medicine is warm." At this time, Zhang Xiaohua noticed that Nie Qinyu and Little Orange were looking at her strangely. She couldn't help but raise her guard and said, "Well, that's good." After that, She handed the medicine to Little Orange and was about to leave. Nie Qinyu wouldn't let go of such a good opportunity. She shouted, Ren Xiaoyao, wait a moment. I have something to ask you. Oh, what is it, Miss Nie? Please tell me. Zhang Xiaohua asked carefully. Little Orange looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a complicated expression and said, Wait a moment. I'll help Miss Nie finish the medicine first. Little Orange's expression made Zhang Xiaohua even more uneasy. She couldn't help but step back and stand with her hands behind her back. After Nie Qinyu finished the medicine, she stared at Zhang Xiaohua for a long time. Zhang Xiaohua stood there, feeling like a fish being stared at by two female cats. She felt a little creepy and couldn't help but ask, Miss Nie, what's the matter? If you have something to ask, please tell me quickly. I've been tired all day and need to rest quickly. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's evasive tone, Nie Qinyu became more nervous. She asked with a smile, Ren Xiaoyao, where's the prescription you just transcribed? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and thought for a moment. He didn't know what was so special about the prescription he wrote, so he said, When I came out of the pharmacy, I just threw it away. Does Miss still want to use that prescription? Oh, right. Do you still need to take the medicine tomorrow morning? I forgot. Little Orange rebuked. Miss Nie wrote the prescription. She doesn't need to take a second dose. This bowl of medicine is enough. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. She asked tentatively, So Miss Nie's medical skills are very good? Nie Qinyu waved her uninjured left hand and said, Little Orange, you're flattering me. Although I know a little about medical skills, I can only treat minor diseases. My current condition is caused by anxiety and a little injury on my wrist. It's really minor. Of course, it can be cured with some medicine. If it's something else, I can't guarantee. Oh, I see. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little regretful. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua like this, Nie Qinyu asked curiously, Could it be that your family members are sick and need a miracle doctor? Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and told her about Ji Xiaohua's mother's illness. Of course, he ignored the details of his encounter with Ji Xiaohua and only told her about a neighbor. Nie Qinyu listened and said with a smile, According to your description, it's just a simple case of tuberculosis. It's very simple. It's just that the family has been poor for a long time and didn't receive timely treatment. The ordinary doctors in town can cure it. If you're still worried, I can write a prescription for you. You can take the medicine and recuperate for 10 days to half a month. You should get better. However, it's been a long time and it's difficult to fully recover. Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed to hear this. Just as he was about to ask her for a prescription, he heard that ordinary doctors could also cure it. He thought about the money he had left for Ji Xiaohua and figured it should be enough. He smiled and said, Since Miss Nie says so, let them go to the medical hall for treatment. I thought it was some serious illness. Nie Qinyu was a little disappointed when she heard this. She said, However, this is just your description. The way to cure a disease still lies in looking, listening, asking, and feeling the pulse. Everything has to be carefully examined. If it's convenient or on the way, I'll go and have a look. Zhang Xiaohua was not willing to let her know the details. He only said, That's too much trouble for Miss Nie. You haven't recovered yet. Let's talk about it in the future when there's a chance. Then he was about to leave. Nie Qinyu realized that she had been led astray by Zhang Xiaohua again. She couldn't help being angry and amused. She said, Ren Xiaoyao, wait a minute. I haven't asked you the question yet. Zhang Xiaohua thought to herself, Nonsense. Of course I know you haven't answered. I just don't want you to ask. But he said, Then please enlighten me, Miss Nie. Nie Qinyu said, How old are you this year? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua said naturally, Miss Nie, you'd better tell me your age first. Then I'll answer your question. Xiao Juezi was unhappy and scolded. Ren Xiaoyao, what are you talking about? Don't you know that a girl's age is confidential? How can you tell others? Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and said, A girl's age can be confidential. Why can't a boy's age be confidential? The teacher once told me that if you want others to do to you, you must do to them first. I don't understand it very well, so please enlighten me, Miss Nie. When I want to ask someone a question, shouldn't I answer their question first? Nie Qinyu and Xiao Juezi were at a loss for words. Wasn't this the reason? She had asked him a question for no reason. Naturally, she had to pay him back. Nie Qinyu couldn't help but be a little angry. How can this guy be so unkind to girls? After thinking for a while, Xiaojuezi said, Ren Xiaoyao, I'm 14 years old this year. You can rest assured now. Can you tell us your age? Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, Hee. When did I say that I'll tell you if you tell me first? Miss Nie said angrily, You can't go back on your word. Zhang Xiaohua wasn't angry at all. She smiled and said, Besides, even if I want to tell you, I have to wait for Miss Nie to finish before it's my turn. Miss Nie was the one who asked me first. So, I'll stay up all night and covet the urge to update. I'll kindly accept it. Thank you, Si Jiao. Sure, just this once. I hope everyone likes it. Please vote for me, hee. -3. Chapter 355. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua behaving like this, Nie Qinyu was really mad. She had never seen such a rascal like Zhang Xiaohua. All the men she had met before, no matter their age, were respectful and kind to her. How could she meet such a strange person today? But if she didn't ask this question, not to mention the knot in her heart, she would think about it all the time in the future. Even Little Orange would have told him her age for nothing. She would have suffered a great loss tonight. Instead of this, she might as well ask his age. After thinking about it, Nie Qinyu said, Since you said so, I will tell you my age. After you hear it, you must tell us your age immediately. What do you think? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, Miss Nie, why do you want to know my age so much? Is it important? Nie Qinyu smiled and said, It's nothing. I'm just curious and want to know. Little Orange also said, Does a woman need a reason to know the answer? Bang! Zhang Xiaohua almost fell to the ground. Is this the real reason? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua so embarrassed, Nie Qinyu and Little Orange seemed to have won back their pride and became complacent. Zhang Xiaohua saw that she couldn't avoid it, so she had to say, Well, Miss Nie, please say it. When you finish, I will answer your question. Nie Qinyu was stunned and felt her face was a little hot. It was the first time she talked about her age in front of a boy who was the same age as her. How could she not be shy? This Ren Xiaoyao, if there was a chance, she would definitely teach him a lesson. 1 month from today, it will be my 12th birthday. Nie Qinyu said it in a very low voice. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's ears were not ordinary, so she heard it clearly. Oh, you are 12 years old. Zhang Xiaohua said it unconsciously, but she sighed in her heart. Look at her. TSK. She's not even 12 years old, but she's already out here with her maidservant. She speaks so logically and is so calm when she's in danger. Look at her last night. She's even better than me now. It's as if she's seen the world. Alas, I'm not afraid of comparing myself with others. Compared to her, I'm simply useless. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua really wanted to shake the sky and shout, Why is there such a big difference between people? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua pondering, Little Orange became anxious and said, Ren Xiaoyao, are you going back on your words? Oh. Zhang Xiaohua came to her senses and said with a smile, Do you think I, Ren Xiaoyao, am that kind of person? Nie Qinyu and Little Orange looked at each other. Both of them felt the same way, but they wouldn't say it out loud. It has been 2 months since my 18th birthday. Zhang Xiaohua said without hesitation. What? Nie Qinyu and Little Orange both cried out, You can't lie to us. You're already 18 years old? Yes. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled and said, What is there to lie about? Since I said I would tell you, why should I lie to you? Do I have to? But you look like you're only 14 or 15 years old. 14 or 15 years old. That was 4 years ago. Hee. Maybe God was jealous of me and made me so delicate? Zhang Xiaohua pinched his chin with a smug look on his face. Bah. The two girls in the hut spat at the same time. The hut fell into a subtle silence for a while. Zhang Xiaohua cupped his hands and said, Miss Nie, if there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. It's already late, so please rest early. At this time, Nie Qinyu said in a low voice that, Ren Xiaoyao, I didn't expect you to be so much older than me. You are even older than my cousin by 2 years. Can I call you Brother Ren in the future? This time, it was Zhang Xiaohua and Little Orange's turn to be surprised. Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, Miss Nie, You look like a lady from a big family. Why do you have to make things difficult for me? If you call me that, it will shorten my life. Nie Qinyu smiled and said, It is very impolite to always call you by your full name Ren Xiaoyao. What if I call you Brother Xiaoyao? Are you willing? When the words Brother Xiaoyao came out, Zhang Xiaohua was so scared that she shrank her neck and had goosebumps all over her body. She waved her hand and said, Whatever, Miss Nie. Anyway, it is only a matter of a few days. You can call me whatever you want. Just don't call my soul away. Okay, you rest early. I will go out. After saying that, she did not wait for Nie Qinyu to reply and left in a hurry with her hands crossed. Before Zhang Xiaohua's figure disappeared, a burst of bell-like laughter came from behind. It was Nie Qinyu's cheerful laughter. Little Orange got up and closed the door of the hut. She said unhappily, Miss, how can you call him Brother Ren? He is just a person from the Jianghu. Even if you think highly of him, you don't have to be like this. Sigh, what do you know? Little Orange, could it be that you are in love? You've taken a liking to this Brother Xiaoyao. That's why you're so jealous? Little Orange looked a little uneasy and rebuked. Miss, look at what you are saying. I have only met him for a day. How could it be like what you are thinking? I just feel that he is always shameless. I feel that it is not worth it for you. Nie Qinyu looked at her seriously and laughed. I am just joking with you. Why do you take it so seriously? You don't know. I heard from Dad that people from the Jianghu are the most carefree. They are always quick to repay kindness and revenge. Looking at Ren Xiaoyao, I think he is really planning to dump us to the bodyguards as long as there is an escort agency in the next town. Hearing this, Little Orange still did not understand and said, If we meet an escort agency again, we can just find a few more highly skilled bodyguards. Ren Xiaoyao is so young. How can he be compared to the escorts in the agency? Nie Qinyu shook her head and said, The escorts in the agency are just second-rate people in the Jianghu. Even the best of them can barely be considered as first-rate. Looking at Ren Xiaoyao's young age, his internal strength should be very profound. He must be much better than the escorts in the agency. Moreover, Nie Qinyu hesitated for a moment. Little Orange continued, Moreover what? Is he better than the 8 escorts? Moreover, Ren Xiaoyao has such a high level of internal strength at such a young age. Think about it, his background must be extraordinary. He must be a disciple from a famous sect in the Jianghu. Didn't you hear him say that he has something important to do and can't be bothered to escort us? According to my speculation, disciples from famous sects are all chivalrous and brave. They like to root out the strong and help the weak. He can't even escort us, so he must have something more important to do. Maybe it is the purpose of his experience in the Jianghu this time? I call him Big Brother so that I can get closer to him. If he is soft-hearted and gives me a token from his sect, or spreads the news that we are related to him, then the people who want to kill us will have to be careful when they take action. They will have to weigh their own weight first. So Miss has thought so much. Hee, I thought Miss had taken a fancy to him, so I wanted to get closer to him. Little Orange said with a smile as if relieved of a burden. Little Orange, could it be that you really have such an idea? Are we implying this in our words? Nie Qinyu seemed to be used to Little Orange's teasing. She changed the topic to Little Orange and said, If that's the case, you have to be careful. Ren Xiaoyao is a disciple of a famous sect. Although he looks ordinary, he has a deep background after all. Maybe many heroines will take a fancy to him. You have to seize the opportunity and seize the time to capture him before he leaves. Little Orange's face was not very clear under the dim light. She laughed and said, Only Miss thinks he is a treasure with profound martial arts. In my opinion, he is just a young man from the countryside. No matter how you look at him, he does not have the demeanor of a Jianghu hero. Just look at his stingy look just now. Does he look like one? Yes, De Xia and Xiao Xia are magnanimous. How can they be like him? Nie Qinyu was also a little confused. But the handwriting on the prescription was still vivid in her mind. The strength of the handwriting was not fake. Then, what was the problem? Seeing that her miss was deep in thought, Little Orange did not dare to disturb her. She sat alone under the light and rested her chin on her hand. She looked at the swaying flame and did not know what she was thinking. Zhang Xiaohua walked out of the house and shook her head. She thought, You just want to get close to me so that I can send you back. Hee hee, do you think I will fall for your honey trap so easily? Well, you are not a beauty anyway. She hummed a tune and walked back to the house. Seeing that it was still early, Zhang Xiaohua sat cross-legged. She was not in a hurry to practice the Worry-Free Heart Sutra. Instead, she began to comprehend the first glimpse of the way of heaven. The comprehension of the way of heaven was really endless. She had comprehended it for almost an entire afternoon, but she had only seen the tip of the iceberg. And this small gain made Zhang Xiaohua feel endlessly useful. She felt that she had scratched her itch. The more she comprehended it, the more she felt it was endless. The more endless it was, the more she wanted to comprehend it. It was not until this moment that Zhang Xiaohua truly understood the joy of cultivation. It was really something that could only be understood and not explained with words. Moreover, it was not until today that Zhang Xiaohua realized that only the comprehension of the way of heaven was the true way of cultivation. The cultivation of the Worry-Free Heart Sutra and other cultivation methods of qi refining. Although it could not be said to be trivial, the purpose of cultivating the Heart Sutra was to enhance one's ability to understand the way of heaven. The 18th layer of qi refining and the legendary foundation building were only the extent to which one could grasp and use the way of heaven. Now that she knew this, how could Zhang Xiaohua neglect the essentials and focus on trifles? -3. Chapter 356. Zhang Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged, wholeheartedly comprehending his own way of heaven. He did not hear the words of the two girls in the hut beside him. In fact, even if he was sitting in the hut, he would not necessarily release his spiritual sense to peep into their hut. After all, men and women should not touch each other. This principle was something that Zhang Xiaohua could still adhere to. After a while, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly felt something. He opened his eyes and looked at the moon that was gradually rising in the sky outside the window. He could not help but secretly nod. The comprehension of the way of heaven was indeed unpredictable. Usually, he would only feel something when he was about to fall asleep. That was just a conditioned reflex of his body when he was about to fall asleep. However, today was different. To be able to feel something while he was meditating was actually a kind of active reminder. The essence was different. The difference was like the difference between clouds and mud. After thinking, Zhang Xiaohua stood up and pushed the door open. He carefully listened to the slight snoring sounds coming from the hut beside him. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and stood in the middle of the small courtyard. He made a gesture with his hands and sent a few strands of zhenqi around the small courtyard, forming a simple restriction that protected the small courtyard. He originally thought that since he had only set up restrictions the size of the hut before, it might be difficult to set up restrictions that were several times larger. However, when he started, he felt that his understanding of restrictions was actually deeper than yesterday. He could set them up with ease. This could only be attributed to the short moment of comprehension of the way of heaven in the afternoon. In fact, it was not only the cultivation of mental cultivation methods, formations and restrictions, alchemy, refining weapons, escaping techniques, and other cultivation methods of the way of immortals were all different elaborations of the way of heaven. Zhang Xiaohua's glimpse of the way of heaven from afar naturally stimulated all his cultivation methods like a catalyst. Using a kind of top-down view to look at these cultivation methods, of course, there would be surprising results when using these cultivation methods. After setting up the restriction, Zhang Xiaohua clapped her hands, very satisfied with her technique. She walked back to the hut proudly and took out 2 more primal stones. She sat down cross-legged and began to cultivate the 6th level of the Carefree Heart Sutra. After midnight, the starlight from the entire sky shone down like silk, faintly emitting a fluorescent light. It was different from before. The quantity and quality of the starlight were also several grades higher. A spherical light screen tightly wrapped Zhang Xiaohua. Inside the light screen, Zhang Xiaohua was like a baby, calmly absorbing the endless starlight. The next morning, when the rooster crowed, Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes. A flame flashed in her eyes, and there was a bit more light. Zhang Xiaohua floated up. First, she practiced the Big Dipper fist several times in the courtyard. To her delight, she discovered that the Big Dipper fist had actually entered the 9th level. Every time she practiced the Big Dipper fist, the energy flow would appear once, tempering all the bones in her body. Only after she finished practicing the 9th time did the energy flow stop. Apart from her delight, Zhang Xiaohua scratched her head. This Big Dipper fist was very strange. It was completely pieced together from the memories in her mind. The 9th level was also randomly set by her. Now that she had practiced to the 9th level, she did not know how to train from now on. However, Zhang Xiaohua was not worried. Left and right, it was just practicing. In the past, she practiced from the beginning to the end, but in the future, would she still practice from the back to the front? Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat. If she practiced from the back to the front, what would happen? However, she was used to practicing from the beginning to the end. It was not that simple to practice from the beginning to the end. Before she had time to think carefully, she heard a coughing sound from the small house. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua did not have time to think about the fist technique. She made a hand seal and removed the restriction around the small courtyard. As soon as he was done, he heard the door creak open and a person walked out from inside. When Zhang Xiaohua turned around, wasn't it Miss Nye Qinyu? When Nye Qinyu saw Zhang Xiaohua standing there and seemingly doing something, she immediately became spirited and smiled. "Good morning, Big Brother Ren. Are you practicing martial arts?" "Miss Nye, why don't you call me Ren Xiaoyao? I feel very awkward when I call you Big Brother Ren." Nye Qinyu repeatedly waved her hands. Didn't you say last night that you could call me Big Brother Ren? I think it's pretty good this way." Zhang Xiaohua helplessly said, "Sigh, it's up to you. It's really up to you. By the way, why did Miss Nye wake up so early? Are you feeling better? Don't you want to sleep a little longer?" Nye Qinyu smiled and said, "Didn't Big Brother Ren wake up even earlier? Isn't there a saying, dance at the sound of the chicken? Are you practicing martial arts?" Seeing that Nye Qinyu kept pressing him and did not even answer her question, she could only say, "I don't practice martial arts. I'm just used to waking up early. I don't have any farm work to do, so I'm walking around here to exercise my hands and feet. The young people in our village are already up and working in the fields. I'm not used to not working in the fields." "You're just making things up." Nye Qinyu did not believe a single word Zhang Xiaohua said and only looked at Zhang Xiaohua with a smile. Zhang Xiaohua felt a little uneasy under her gaze and could only ask, "How's Miss Nye's condition?" "I've recovered a long time ago. My fever went down in the second half of last night. I've slept for almost a day and a night. I didn't feel sleepy this morning. I thought I was already very early, but I didn't expect Big Brother Ren to be here." After Nye Qinyu finished speaking, she also slightly moved her hands and feet. Zhang Xiaohua felt very strange and asked, "Miss Nye's wrist is also very good? Has the swelling gone down?" "Yes, it also went down last night." "Ah," Zhang Xiaohua said in surprise. "Miss Nye is really a divine doctor. Just one decoction and the fever has gone down. Even the swelling on your wrist has gone down. It's really incredible." Nye Qinyu laughed out loud. Her black eyes were filled with spring breeze as she said, "Big Brother Ren, you've overestimated me. That decoction only reduced the fever and only had a slight effect of removing blood stasis and reducing swelling. The reason why the swelling on my wrist went down so quickly was because I had already applied the ointment in advance. After a day of the ointment seeping into my wrist, I saw the effect last night." Zhang Xiaohua felt very embarrassed and asked casually, "Miss Nye's medical skills are so brilliant. I wonder if it's passed down in your family? I wonder if someone like me can learn it." Nye Qinyu rolled her eyes and said, "Of course my medical skills were passed down from my father. Medical skills are also passed down from generation to generation in my family. However, if Big Brother Ren escorts us home, I'm sure my father will consider this request carefully." Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua immediately interrupted. Looking at the unlatched door, she asked, "Why hasn't little Orange woken up yet? She's an incompetent maid. How can a maid not serve the miss when she gets up?" Nye Qinyu laughed out loud again and asked, "Could it be that Big Brother Ren has read too many novels? Although little Orange is my maid, she grew up with me. We're like sisters. Why would I need her to serve me at all times? Moreover, little Orange has been watching over me for a day and a night without any rest. Last night when she saw that my fever had subsided, she felt relieved and went to sleep." Zhang Xiaohua didn't want to talk to her anymore. She cupped her hands and said, Miss Nya, please move around and breathe in some fresh air. I'll go back to my room and sleep again. Nya Chinyu said anxiously, Hey, big brother Ren, even a hard-working farmer needs to sleep again? Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, Who doesn't eat dumplings during the new year? It's rare for me to be free. Naturally, I have to make up for the lost sleep when working in the field. After that, she turned around and walked back to her room. Without looking back, she said, Miss Nya, you'd better not go outside so as not to be seen by others. Nya Chinyu bit her lips and stamped her feet helplessly. The next 2 days were peaceful and quiet. Zhang Xiaohua and the others hid in the small courtyard. Zhang Xiaohua would go to the inn to get their daily meals. She did not allow the waiter or the innkeeper to take half a step into the small courtyard, afraid that they would leak out any information. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua also knew that even if those bad guys were from some big Jianghu sect, they wouldn't be able to search every house like the government. At most, they would go to inns and tea houses to inquire about information. However, for safety's sake, he still hid in the small house. However, even if he hid in the small house to meditate and comprehend the way of heaven and heart sutra, he still released his divine sense. With Zhang Xiaohua's current divine sense, his divine sense could already cover the entire town. From time to time, he could see many Jianghu people riding on horses on the main road. There were also some unknown people inquiring about the town. However, whether they were looking for Nye Qinyu or not, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't be sure. There were also people inquiring about the inn Zhang Xiaohua stayed in. However, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that. He was immersed in the pleasure of comprehending the way of heaven, so how could he waste too much time on this? When the inquisitor saw that the inn didn't intend to enter and saw the innkeeper's lazy look, he became even more impatient. When he heard that there was a carriage in the yard behind, he stuck his head out to take a look. When he found out that it was a village boy driving the carriage, he didn't waste any more time and went to the next inn. However, his carelessness saved his life. Zhang Xiaohua was already prepared. If anyone came looking for him, as long as there were only a few people, he would kill them all. Therefore, he was quietly cultivating and waiting for someone to take the bait. Early this morning, Zhang Xiaohua used his divine sense to scan outside and found that the unknown people from 2 days ago had disappeared. Therefore, he came to look for Nye Qinyu. Nye Qinyu's body was already fine. It was just that her wrist was fractured, which was inconvenient. She still needed to rest for a few more days. However, didn't she have Little Orange? She didn't feel any particular inconvenience. When Zhang Xiaohua entered the house, he didn't stand on ceremony and directly said, Miss Nya, we've been hiding in this small town for 2 days. Come to think of it, those people who were chasing after you should have passed by now. I think it's better for us to set off now and find an escort agency as soon as possible so that we can find a bodyguard who can protect you. That's the most important thing. Nye Qinyu thought for a while and said, It's about a 2-day journey from here. We should be in Tanha City. There should be a large-scale escort agency there. I wonder if it's convenient for Brother Rin? -3. Chapter 357. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while. Fortunately, the place was on the map Ji Xiaohua gave him. It seemed that it was on the way. So he nodded and said, Miss Nya, it's great that you know the way. Since it's on the way, I'll accompany you for a while. It's on the way, Brother Rin. May I know where you're going? Nye Qinyu asked in surprise. Little Orange's eyes flickered. Where am I going? Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and said with a smile, Sorry, I can't tell you. The two expectant ladies almost choked and rolled their eyes. Was it necessary? After all, they had gone through thick and thin together. Why couldn't he tell them such a small thing? However, the two of them seemed to have forgotten that they didn't even tell him where they were going. Well, maybe they had the rule of ladies first in their hearts, but the Guozhuang house was also Zhang Xiaohua's taboo. Unless it was a last resort, he would never say a word about it, especially when there were so many wolves following behind them. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua looking up at the white clouds in the sky, as if there were endless stories there, Nye Qinyu could only pout and ask Little Orange to pack up and get on the carriage. Fortunately, they didn't plan to stay here for a long time. Everything was in the shabby carriage, so it was easy to pack up. Not long after, they got on the carriage. Zhang Xiaohua went to the counter of the inn to settle the bill and tactfully tipped the waiter a few copper coins. He felt very awkward, but the innkeeper was very happy. Not to mention how much the tip was. This young man had booked an old courtyard and didn't even need the waiter to call him. If there was anything, he would come to the counter himself, which saved them a lot of trouble. They only met a few customers like this in a year. So when Zhang Xiaohua left, the innkeeper sent him off far away, almost wiping his tears with his sleeves. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know and thought that it was the reason for the tip. He praised the charm of the money and raised his vigilance, afraid that the innkeeper would find clues from the carriage. Actually, he was worrying too much. The shopkeeper had also been running the inn for many years. Although he was lazy to run the inn and treated people indifferently, he still had a pair of eyes, didn't he? How could they not see clearly? You have stayed in the small courtyard of the inn for many days. Even if they did not deliberately observe you, they would still have a rough idea. When Zhang Xiaohua often took 2 portions of food from the inn, he had long been labeled as eloping or running away from marriage. He was taken care of by the experienced innkeeper. This was also the main reason why they were not harassed by people who wanted to find out more information. Zhang Xiaohua did not release her divine sense, so of course, she could not see the ambiguous look in the shopkeeper's eyes. She drove the carriage slowly forward and was very satisfied with her performance in this town. Who said that people with no hair on their mouths couldn't do their jobs well? This young master has just entered the pugilistic world, and I've already played those bad guys in circles. On the road again, Zhang Xiaohua was not in a hurry. First of all, Nie Qinyu's wrist had not fully recovered, and she was afraid that it would be damaged by the bumps. Second of all, there might be bad guys blocking the way ahead. Who would be stupid enough to rush forward? Third of all, Zhang Xiaohua was sitting cross-legged in the carriage leisurely. It was a good time to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Cough, cough. Actually, the most important thing was that the shabby carriage Zhang Xiaohua bought could not go too fast at all. Along the way, she listened to the creaking sound of the small carriage. Every time there was a slightly bumpy road, she would feel her heart in her throat. She was afraid that the carriage would fall apart. Finally, Little Orange could not stand it anymore. She lifted the somewhat dirty curtain and asked, "Ren Xiaoyao, are you doing this on purpose?" Her question pulled Zhang Xiaohua back from her daydream. She was very puzzled and asked, "Little Orange, what's wrong? Why would I do that on purpose? Look at what kind of carriage this is. It might not be able to travel much in a day. When will we be able to go home? If you want to spend more time with us, just say the word. We see that you have worked hard and let you escort us for a while. What you are doing is unnecessary." Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and said, "Little Orange, when I bought the carriage that day, didn't you agree? Why are you going back on your words now? It's really hard to be a good person." Nie Qinyu's soft voice sounded again. "Brother Ren is doing it for our own good. Little Orange, don't blame him. If he is not in a hurry, why should we be in a hurry?" But Little Orange was a little annoyed and said, "He used our money to buy this junk?" Puffed. Nie Qinyu laughed and said, "I was wondering what was going on. So you were worried about your own private money. Hee hee, I know you are a good wife who can take care of the family. You don't have to show off here." "You, miss, you, just wait, I can't even say a word." Little Orange's words were spoken intermittently, and he couldn't hear them clearly. Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua complained in her heart. There was a saying that 3 women make a play. These 2 girls were also 500 ducks. They were not out of danger yet, and they were already flirting with an innocent young man. Zhang Xiaohua did not say anything and reached out to pat Huan's butt. Huan seemed to have received an order and started to run quickly. There were 2 clangs from the carriage behind them and a slight cry of pain. Then there was the loud creaking sound of the carriage, and it was quiet in the carriage. Even though Huan ran fast, the carriage was still very slow. The 3 of them were starving for food and drink along the way. It was only when it was almost dark that they arrived at another town. They found an inn and settled down a little. Zhang Xiaohua went to inquire for information. According to the innkeeper's introduction, this place was still about a day and a half away from Tanha City. Zhang Xiaohua was taken aback, but he immediately understood that his carriage was too slow. It had only taken him half a day's journey the entire morning. The next day, they set off again. Zhang Xiaohua did not increase her speed and instead slowed down a little. This was because she knew that there was only one main road from Tanha City to the town where they were attacked. It should not be too difficult for the group of people who were chasing after Nie Qinyu to find the luxurious carriage that she abandoned. Of course, she could also imagine that Nie Qinyu would change to another carriage, and they would definitely rush to Tanha City to look for clues. Of course, there were no clues there. Zhang Xiaohua was betting that the group of people would think that Nie Qinyu had been rescued by her family and took another road or had run out of their hunting range. But they did not expect that Nie Qinyu was still strolling slowly on the road to Tanha City. Besides, they were not the government, so of course they could not set up checkpoints to check one by one, right? Didn't the books often say, the most dangerous place is the safest place? Perhaps it was because of Zhang Xiaohua's intuition that almost nothing unusual happened for the rest of the day. In the afternoon, a group of people dressed in similar clothes to the people who were chasing after Nie Qinyu passed by in a hurry. The leader of the group only casually glanced at Zhang Xiaohua and his David's deer before immediately looking away and rushing straight ahead. When those people were far away, Nie Qinyu poked her head out. After looking for a while, she frowned. Zhang Xiaohua asked, "Are these people chasing after you?" Nie Qinyu shook her head blankly and said, "I don't know. Their clothes look similar, but there are many people in the Jianghu who wear similar clothes, so I can't be sure that it's them. Besides, to be honest, I don't know which immortal is chasing after us." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Even if you were killed, you would still be confused ghosts." Bah! Nie Qinyu spat and shrank back into the carriage. However, she immediately poked her head out again and asked curiously, "Brother Ren, didn't you say that you're an ordinary farmer in the countryside? Why aren't you afraid at all when encountering such a fierce man in the Jianghu?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and thought, "Isn't that right? How could there be such a calm countryman like me?" He touched his nose and said, "Didn't I tell you before? I've studied the three-character classic for a few months, and I know the principle of might cannot be bent, wealth cannot be obscenities." "You're just making things up." Nie Qinyu angrily retracted her head. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and felt that arguing with a girl seemed to be as interesting as understanding the way of heaven. Not long after, there was another town that he could rest in. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment. Although it was still early, he stopped moving forward. Sleeping in the wilderness was something he had no choice but to do. It was better to be careful. He asked the locals and found out that this place was only half a day's journey away from Tanha City. He estimated that he would reach his destination tomorrow afternoon. What made Zhang Xiaohua the happiest was that according to the locals' introduction, there was a large-scale escort company in Tanha City called Fushun Escort Company. It was said that they were very powerful and could escort people as well as deliver items. Zhang Xiaohua secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After sending them to the escort agency, his task would be completed. He had to go home as soon as possible. It was already winter. If he hurried, he might be able to go home for the new year. Thinking that his family could sit at the same table and have a reunion dinner, Zhang Xiaohua felt warm in his heart and wanted to go home as soon as possible. Early the next morning, Zhang Xiaohua woke them up to hurry. Nie Qinyu and Little Orange looked unhappy, not knowing whether it was because they didn't sleep well or because Zhang Xiaohua wanted to leave them to the escort agency. They didn't meet any Jianghu people along the way. There were a few who were alone and had nothing to do with them. Also in the afternoon, they arrived at a slightly deserted area. While chatting with Zhang Xiaohua, they heard the sound of hurried horse hooves ahead. Zhang Xiaohua released his divine sense and saw 5 men in neat clothes riding toward them. He didn't dare to be careless and quickly asked the two to hide in the carriage while he pretended to drive the carriage. Huan was still the same, pulling the shabby carriage to the middle. Zhang Xiaohua quickly asked it to return to the side of the road. The 5 men in neat clothes only looked up at Zhang Xiaohua and his shabby carriage and didn't care. When they were about to pass by, a man with very thick eyebrows suddenly shouted, "Hall Master, please wait for a moment. There's something wrong with this carriage." -3. Chapter 358. The 5 horses were running very fast and couldn't stop in time. They all rushed forward very far. Zhang Xiaohua heard someone talking and couldn't help but frown slightly. She continued to pretend that she didn't hear anything and patted the four odd beasts to continue forward. When the 5 people stopped their horses by the side of the road and saw Zhang Xiaohua's carriage leisurely moving forward without any hurry, they didn't rush to stop her. They heard the leader ask, "Zhang Heshu, are you talking about that shabby little carriage?" The thick-browed Zhang Heshu nodded and said, "Yes, Hall Master Qiu. It is that carriage." Hall Master Qiu stared at the carriage for a while and muttered, "There doesn't seem to be anything different. Could it be that you can see how many people are in the carriage?" Hall Master Qiu must be joking. "This little one doesn't have X-ray eyes, so how can I see?" "Then you? It's like this, Hall Master Qiu. This little one led my brothers to search for you yesterday and saw this carriage by the side of the road. At that time, this little one only gave it a slight glance and didn't pay it any attention. However, when I saw it again today, I found some clues." You're quite attentive. As expected of someone I brought in from the outer hall. Tell me, don't you think it makes sense? Hall Master Qiu is wise. Look at this shabby carriage. It has long been broken. If it was a normal person, they would definitely have left it outside their house to rot, or simply used an axe to chop it up for firewood. However, this young man used a mule to pull his carriage and traveled for 2 days. Don't you think it's a little strange? When Hall Master Qiu heard this, he frowned and said, "Little Jiang, what you said doesn't make any sense at all. The farmers in the countryside are all extremely poor. How could it be like what you said, where they would casually throw everything around and use everything to chop firewood? This young man used such an ugly mule to drive such a shabby carriage. It's really normal. There's nothing strange about it. But, Hall Master, he has traveled for 2 days. He should have tidied up this shabby carriage a little earlier. But look at the wheels of his carriage. They are already crooked and can't bear the burden. I estimate that they will fall apart in half a day. If he is seriously going to travel a long distance, how can he not fix it in advance?" This Hall Master Qiu seemed to be stumped by the question. He smiled and said, "To be honest, I really can't tell that the wheel is about to fall apart. Little Jiang, how can you tell?" "This lowly one. When this lowly one was young, before I entered this hall, I was a coachman with a whip," Zhang Heshu said embarrassedly. When Zhang Xiaohua, who was eavesdropping in front of them, heard this, she almost fell off the carriage. Her luck was truly too terrible. When this carriage was bought, it had been left unused for a long time. Of course, it couldn't travel long distances. Furthermore, she didn't plan on using this shabby carriage to travel. She only wanted to use it to safely send Miss Nia to the escort agency. Then, she would wash her hands of it and let a professional take over. Great, they hadn't even reached Tanha City yet, but she had already met an expert. Hall Master Qiu seemed to be a curious child who wanted to get to the bottom of things. He continued to say, "Little Jiang, you also know that before our sect appears in the Jianghu, everything must be done in a low-profile manner. I can't just disturb the people based on your simple deduction. Do you have any other evidence?" Zhang Xiaohua really despised this Hall Master Qiu's way of doing things. What low profile? All he did was kill and rob, and he was recruiting people all over the streets. How could this not disturb the people? However, she also wanted to know where the flaw was, so she couldn't help but perk up her ears. Zhang Heshu continued, "Also, Hall Master Qiu, your inner strength is profound. I'm sure you can hear how many people are in the carriage from beside it." Hall Master Qiu nodded and said, "That shouldn't be difficult." "That's right. If it was the luxurious carriage that they found earlier, it would be fast and silent. You would be able to hear the breathing sounds in the carriage as soon as you passed by it. Naturally, they wouldn't be able to keep it a secret. Listen to this carriage. It makes creaking sounds along the way. Can you tell? They must be afraid that people would discover the number of people in the carriage, so they specially chose an old carriage." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she was secretly happy. She didn't think that she was so smart. Why didn't she realize this before? She was even discovered by someone else. No wonder people often said, "A horse of 1,000 li is common, but a talent scout is hard to find." Hall Master Qiu nodded slightly. Zhang Heshu continued, "Actually, Hall Master Qiu, there's still the most important point." "HM?" Hall Master Qiu was a bit unhappy. After talking for so long, He was still keeping her in suspense. He didn't even mention the most important point. Seeing that Hall Master Chiu was frowning, Zhang Heshu hurriedly said, "You also know that this little one was a coachman in the past. Look at his carriage. It seems like the cushion is already broken. When he moves, it's already shaking up and down. The shaking is still very big. This means that there's definitely something heavy in the carriage. Also, look at the mule in front. Oh, that doesn't seem to be a mule. This little one has used a mule to drive a carriage before. It seems to be a bit strenuous. Although a mule is slower than a horse, a mule can pull things. Since a mule is strenuous, there must be something heavy in this shabby little carriage." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, she couldn't help but blush with shame. Of course, her sword was on the back of the David's deer. How could it not be strenuous? The carriage that she had arranged had actually been seen through in 3 places. Sigh, she couldn't help but admit that she was still lacking in Jianghu experience. This expert didn't seem to have grown up eating anything. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's carriage was already some distance away from the 5 men. The 5 men were not in a hurry and were still eagerly studying the carriage from behind when they heard Hall Master Chiu say with a laugh, "Little Jiang, your martial arts are weak and cannot convince the others, but I still appointed you as the team leader because I can see how meticulous you are and how you can think things through. Hee, not bad. You were actually able to see so many problems from this shabby carriage. This means that I did not misjudge you. If you can really find those 2 girls and complete the sect master's orders, I will definitely reward you handsomely." When Zhang Heshu heard this, he was overjoyed and repeatedly said modestly, "It's all because of Hall Master Chiu's good fortune that this little one was able to see it." Hall Master Chiu smiled and said, "However, after analyzing for so long, what if this youth is just a tenant farmer in the countryside who borrowed a shabby carriage from elsewhere to deliver grain to Tanha City? The grain is very heavy and the carriage is prepared to be repaired at Tanha City? Wouldn't your deductions all be for naught?" This, Zhang Heshu was speechless. Hall Master Chiu said proudly, "You don't have any other ideas, right?" "Yes, Hall Master is wise. Perhaps this little one was wrong. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. I have a way to know if you're right or wrong." Zhang Heshu's face was filled with longing as he asked, "Hall Master, please teach me?" "Ha ha ha." Hall Master Chiu laughed loudly and said, "All your deductions are nonsense. Stop him and let him open the carriage's curtains to take a look." After saying this, he urged his horse to chase after Zhang Heshu. At this moment, Hall Master Chiu had tossed their gate master's order of not disturbing the people to the highest heavens. Seeing that Hall Master Chiu was happy, Zhang Heshu was also overjoyed. He also patted his horse and followed behind, not forgetting to say with concern, "Hall Master is wise. This little one can't flatter you." However, Hall Master should still be careful. After all, Vice Hall Master Zhang is a good example. Seeing that Zhang Heshu was both flattering and showing concern for Hall Master Chiu, the eyes of the other 3 also lit up. What a talent! No wonder he could climb from a coachman to a captain. He really wasn't bragging. That's right, the coachman was a youth. Even if he knew martial arts, how could he be Hall Master Chiu's opponent? These words naturally made Hall Master Chiu's heart warm up, feeling the warmth of spring. Presumably, even if there was nothing wrong with the carriage, Zhang Heshu would still be promoted later. When Zhang Xiaohua heard the sound of horse hooves behind them, she sighed inwardly. You don't want to take the broad road, but you want to take the narrow wooden bridge instead. When the 5 of them caught up to the carriage, they heard Hall Master Chiu shout, "You brat, stop the carriage." Then, the 5 of them surrounded the carriage and drew their swords from their waists. Obviously, even if they hadn't eaten pork, they would have seen a pig run. We don't know how to flatter, so we should learn from him. Seeing that this youth is unarmed, we should also draw our swords and pretend to be loyal and devoted. Hall Master Chiu was very satisfied with the performance of his subordinates. With a serious expression, he asked, "Young man, where's your carriage going? What's in the carriage?" Zhang Xiaohua trembled as he got down from the carriage. He cupped his hands and asked, "Are the 5 officials from Tanha City's garrison?" Hall Master Chiu was stunned. He really didn't dare to rashly admit it, so he could only say, "We are not officials." When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, his expression relaxed. he said. If the 5 of you are not officials, please step aside. This humble one has already reported to Tanha City's garrison. If there is anything, you should look for the city's garrison. After he finished speaking, he turned around and pretended to leave. When Jiang Heshu saw this, he raised his sword and shouted, "Brat, stand still. This lord is asking you a question." Zhang Xiaohua was so scared that he trembled. However, he still rolled his eyes and said indifferently, "Didn't this humble one say that this humble one's carriage was reported to the garrison? Since you are not soldiers, please step aside." In fact, when Zhang Xiaohua stopped the carriage, Hall Master Qiu had already carefully listened to the movements inside the carriage. His internal energy was profound, so he could barely hear the breathing of 2 people in the carriage. He already had some doubts in his heart. However, this young man kept saying that he was an official, so he was intimidated. However, if he didn't see it with his own eyes, he really couldn't be at ease. After thinking for a moment, he took out a large ingot of silver from his bosom and said, "Brat, if you answer my question, this is yours." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. He immediately beamed with joy and said, "If you give it to me first, I will naturally answer." Hall Master Qiu sneered and threw the silver ingot to Zhang Xiaohua. He was in a hurry. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and secretly said, "Is he going to make a move now?" Qidian Chinese website welcomes readers to read the latest, fastest, and most popular series of works at Qidian Originals. -3. Chapter 359. Just as he was about to dodge, he saw Hall Chief Qiu's interested gaze and couldn't help but smile in his heart. He was wearing a long robe and naturally wasn't afraid of any harm from the silver. He pretended that he didn't know martial arts and didn't know how to dodge. He only reached out to grab it. In the blink of an eye, the silver was in front of Zhang Xiaohua's chest. Just as it was about to hit his body, it suddenly curved and fell down, falling straight to the ground in front of Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's hand naturally missed. He's also a hidden weapon expert. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but be a little vigilant. He smiled as he picked up the silver from the ground and put it into his pocket. He said, "Didn't Sir just want to know what's in the carriage? That's the 200 caddies of rice that Captain Wu's brother-in-law ordered from our village last time. This little one borrowed a carriage to send it to the city." "So it's like that." Jiang Heshu was clearly disappointed. Hall Chief Qiu asked again, "There's only rice in the carriage and nothing else. For example, is there anyone inside?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "How could there be anyone? Sir must be joking." Hall Chief Qiu's expression changed and said, "But when I passed by your carriage just now, I heard the voices of women inside." Zhang Xiaohua's expression also changed. He thought for a moment and gritted his teeth and said, "Sir, you have to keep this a secret for me. To be honest, there are 2 women in the carriage, but they are the lovers of Captain Wu and his brother-in-law. They met in our village, and this time, they took this little one's carriage to Tanha City. This little one knows that Captain Wu and his brother-in-law are men who are afraid of their wives and don't want to get involved in this kind of business. However, they threatened this little one. If this little one didn't take the carriage, they wouldn't let this little one send grain into the city in the future. This little one is really wronged." Hearing the 2 people's heavy breathing in the carriage, Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. Although Zhang Xiaohua's acting was quite convincing, Hall Master Qiu didn't seem to have any intention of letting her go. He only smiled and said, "This one has met Tanha City's Captain Wu once and I know his preferences. How about this little brother let this one take a look at his lover's appearance? In the future, this one will be able to imitate her and suit his tastes. What do you think?" Zhang Xiaohua had a troubled look on her face as she said, "How can this do? That's inappropriate." As he spoke, he unconsciously rubbed his fingers together. Hall Master Qiu smiled. She fished out another ingot of silver and tossed it to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua casually caught it and said with a smile, "Since they're Captain Wu's friends, it's only natural for us to meet them. Hee, wait a moment. This little one will have them come down now." With that, he turned around and walked back to the carriage. Standing beside Huan Huan, he pulled open the curtain of the carriage and said with a smile, "Everyone, please take a look." When Hall Master Qiu saw Nye Qinyu and Little Orange, who had already changed into village girl's attire, His smile froze on his face as he shouted, It's the two of them. Men, capture them." On the other hand, Nye Qinyu and Little Orange were nervous and their faces were red. They didn't expect Zhang Xiaohua to really pull open the curtain of the carriage. When they saw the 5 people holding swords, they became afraid. Before Hall Master Qiu's voice fell, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Hall Master Qiu, I've already answered your question. I've also let you see them. The silver is mine now." Then, she casually picked up the sword on Huan's back and said sinisterly, "However, you blocked my path and actually saw through my weakness. What face do you have left? You've embarrassed me in front of this little girl. This is a big problem. Come, come, come. Eat my sword first, then we'll talk about other things." With that, she exerted a little force with her right leg and executed the levitation technique. She leaped high into the air, half a body taller than Hall Master Qiu, who was riding on the horse. Then, she raised her sword high and slashed at Hall Master Qiu. When Hall Master Qiu saw Zhang Xiaohua's qinggong, he was shocked. However, when he saw the flaws in Zhang Xiaohua's swordsmanship, disdain appeared in his heart. A treasured sword is for stabbing, not for slashing. Then, he casually raised his sword to block. But the moment the two swords came into contact, a weight as heavy as Mount Tai came from the sword. Hall Master Qiu immediately took a deep breath and forcefully circulated his internal energy, wanting to withstand the weight. Unfortunately, how could he withstand the weight of 10,000 kilograms? With a crack, the treasured sword in his hand broke into two. Zhang Xiaohua's sword did not lose its momentum and smashed directly on Hall Master Qiu's shoulder. Then, with a peub sound, his shoulder was smashed into a bloody mess and half of his chest collapsed. At the same time, the horse under him also let out a mournful neigh and collapsed to the ground. Then, Zhang Xiaohua lightly tapped the horse's head with her sword. The horse immediately fell to the ground and stopped breathing. Zhang Xiaohua's sword strike was so powerful that it left everyone present dumbfounded. Yes, Nye Qinyu and Little Orange were first embarrassed and angry, then scared. Then, they saw the ordinary-looking young man who had been with them for a few days fly up high like a god and slap a person who was skilled in martial arts to death on the back of a horse. That strength was so strong that the horse was forced to kneel. Was he still human? In that instant, the two of them had the same thought in their minds, mutant. Then, under the watchful eyes of Nye Qinyu and Little Orange, Zhang Xiaohua did not hold back. The moment she landed, she tapped her foot and flew towards another man. The tip of her sword was pointed at that man's chest. That man did not know what to do and was about to dodge. However, Zhang Xiaohua's qinggong was so amazing that before that man could think, her sword had already pointed at his chest. With just a light tap, that man's chest caved in. That man vomited blood and fell off the horse. Zhang Xiaohua kicked the horse he was on and used the momentum to shoot towards another man like an arrow. That horse, however, fell to the ground and could not get up. In just a short while, the 5 living martial arts masters and their horses were all lying on the road. Zhang Xiaohua looked left and right, then put the long sword back on Huan's back. He easily cleaned up the mess on the road and threw them far away into the forest by the side of the road. Only then did he clap his hands and return to the side of the carriage. At this time, Nye Qinyu and Little Orange were completely petrified. They looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was both familiar and strange at the same time. Their eyes were burning with a trace of fear. It seemed that they wanted to say something, but they did not wake up from the bloody scene just now. Zhang Xiaohua ignored them. She put down the curtain and sat cross-legged on the carriage. She patted Huan's butt, and Huan ran happily on the road again. Nye Qinyu and Little Orange heard Zhang Xiaohua muttering to herself, "Is this carriage really so shabby? It can only run for half a day? If I had known, I would have kept that guy alive and repaired the carriage for me. Then I would have killed him." Clang! The two of them flipped over the carriage and did not know what to say. Fortunately, this place was very close to Tanhe City, and the road was much smoother. Zhang Xiaohua finally arrived at Tanhe City before sunset, and half a day before the carriage's lifespan was up. This was a city bigger than Pingyang City. One could see the prosperity of this city from the bustling crowd. Zhang Xiaohua drove the shabby carriage and entered Tanha City from the middle of the city gate, as if she did not have the consciousness of a poor person. She did not know if it was the negligence of the city guards, or because there were too many people entering and leaving the city as it was getting dark, so they did not find trouble with Zhang Xiaohua. Since she had entered the city, Zhang Xiaohua felt more at ease. Although Nie Qinyu's opponents were people from the martial arts world, they could not be compared to the officials. The city was full of officials, and they had to be wary of them. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua did not deliberately look for a remote inn. She only looked for a few random ones, but none of them were satisfactory. She had no choice but to continue driving the shabby carriage forward. Nie Qinyu and Little Orange were puzzled. There were obviously a few inns with empty courtyards for them to stay in. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and walked away. However, Zhang Xiaohua had given them too much of a shock. Not only did they not dare to talk to Zhang Xiaohua along the way, they were still afraid of her even now. However, in the end, Nie Qinyu could not help but ask, "Hero, run. The inns just now obviously had courtyards. Why didn't you stay there?" Zhang Xiaohua looked back at her and said faintly, "I still have 3 coins left from the money Little Orange gave me. However, the cheapest inns just now cost at least 5 coins. How can I stay there if I don't have enough money? Why don't we stay in the guest room?" Nie Qinyu frowned and said, "Hero, run. The hall leader seemed to have given you 2 ingots of silver. It should be dozens of taels. How can you say that it's not enough?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Miss Nie, you are wrong. Those 2 ingots of silver were for me, not for you. I helped you find an inn, so you should be the one paying the bill." You. Nie Qinyu did not know how to answer this young man who was ridiculously skilled in martial arts, but who was so clear about the difference between money and money. Little Orange, who was behind them, said softly, "Stingy." After that, she rummaged inside and then threw out an emerald green pouch. She said, "This is Miss Nie's pouch. There is some gold in it. You can spend it however you like." If it was a few days ago, she would have said, "Keep the rest for yourself." But today, she did not dare to say this sentence out loud. She could only secretly whisper it in her heart. Zhang Xiaohua took the pouch and opened it. He said with a smile, "Miss Nie, you are so stingy. You should have taken it out earlier. You even made me go to so many places." Then he put it in his arms naturally. With the silver, it was easy to do things. He did not need to search further. He just found a slightly cleaner inn and stayed there. This night was a little lonely. Nie Qinyu and Little Orange did not dare to joke with Zhang Xiaohua like before and ask him to do this and that. Zhang Xiaohua was also dutiful. He still did not let the waiter enter the courtyard. He only brought in the food and other things, which made them feel a little relieved. After settling the 2 girls down, Zhang Xiaohua closed the door and sat in the pitch-black room to meditate and cultivate. In the small room next to him, the 2 little girls could not help but whisper in a low voice. -3. Chapter 360. There was no light in the hut. It was pitch dark, and there was no other sound except for the unnatural breathing of the 2 people. After a long time, Little Orange finally could not help but ask, "Miss, are you asleep?" "No." Nie Qinyu answered firmly, "How can I sleep?" "Me too, Mississippi. I can see run. Hero run killing people as soon as I close my eyes." Sigh. A few days ago, that group of people killed 8 bodyguards in front of our eyes, and those people were killed by an unknown senior. Such a bloody scene was not as shocking as Hero run killing people today. Not to mention you, even I, even though I was prepared, was caught off guard. I really did not expect him to be so strong. Nie Qinyu's voice was getting lower and lower. Little Orange sighed and said, "Miss, you have sharp eyes and can see the true face of this guy. I was deceived by him and even ordered him to do some servant's work. I don't know if he remembers it or not." Bah! Nie Qinyu could not help but spit and said, "You want him to remember, but he also has to be patient. If he is not willing to do it, even if you talk until your mouth is broken, he may not do it." Then, she murmured, "Little Orange, do you think we have some fate with him?" "Fate?" Little Orange was a little panicked and said, "Miss, don't talk nonsense about fate. You see, we just saved a heroine, and after a delay, we met him a few days later. You? The crazy words you said were all heard by him. Do you still remember? He even waved at us, and then asked about us, the David's deer. If he asked about other things, I can't guarantee, but if he asked where the David's deer is, I think in this world, maybe only our Rejuvenation Valley has it. Although the question he asked was very simple, it could be considered as a good karma. That's right, Little Orange. Don't you think that his appearance that morning was very sudden? He seems to be related to the senior who saved us the day before. Maybe he was sent by that senior to protect us. Little Orange laughed, and the atmosphere in the room became lively. She said, "Miss, you're not telling me a story from a novel, are you? If he was the disciple of that senior, he would have appeared the night before. Moreover, he would have directly escorted us back to the villa. Why would he be like him, refusing to send us back with so many excuses?" Well, that's true. Besides, I didn't see any white-bearded or white-haired old man beside him that day. Then, the room fell into silence again. After a while, Chinyu hesitated and said, "Little Orange, do you think he will really throw us into the escort agency and send us away with a few bodyguards or armed escorts?" "Miss, I think." In the dark, Little Orange was also very hesitant. He said, "I think it's very possible, but doesn't he have any sense of chivalry? We are both poor and weak girls. Can't he just help us a little and send us home?" Little Orange was silent for a while and did not say anything. Chinyu was a little anxious. She said, Little Orange, are you asleep?" "No, Mississippi. I can't sleep now, just like you." "Then why don't you answer my question?" "Alas, miss, do you feel that your mind is in a mess right now?" You can only imagine him holding a long sword in his hand, leaping up from the ground, like a hero stepping on a colorful cloud, descending from the sky. A long sword that can cut through any evil, without hesitation, slashing at the heinous devil in front of him. That sword that you have never seen before, as if once slashing down, you will be protected by him, and you will never be afraid of the troubles of the world. "Ah!" Chinyu exclaimed in a low voice. She said, "Little Orange, how do you know?" Little Orange sighed deeply and didn't answer her question. Instead, she asked, "Miss, we've never met him before. First, he helped us pull our carriage back from the wilderness and took care of us for several days. Then, in the afternoon, he killed a few people who wanted to steal the treasure right in front of us. Judging by the way those people acted, their status should be even higher than the bad guy who attacked us the first time. To be honest, we owe him more than the senior who used the flying sword. You're constantly thanking the senior who you've never met, yet you're blaming this person who just saved our lives. Do you think this is still the calm and decisive Miss Nya, who's always been so calm and decisive?" Well, Nya Chinyu was speechless. After a while, she said, "Little Orange, you usually don't know anything. I have to teach you everything. How come you suddenly know so much?" "Miss, it's nothing. I am just a few years older than you." "What do you mean?" Nya Chinyu was very confused. Alas, Little Orange sighed again. It seemed that he had sighed more tonight than he had in the past 14 years. After a while, perhaps young Miss will know for herself? Really? Nya Chinyu was a little confused. However, Nya Chinyu immediately asked, "Then, what do you think we should do now?" Little Orange's worried face could not be seen in the dark. He only said, "Miss, I am just like you. My heart is in a mess. Don't ask me." Then, Nya Chinyu asked tentatively, "Little Orange, do you think I should tell him about our situation?" "Please don't, miss." Xiao Juzi immediately stopped her. As the saying goes, you may know a person for a long time without understanding his true nature. He doesn't know that we have treasures on us now. Once he knows the value of the treasures, he might come up with new ideas. He might even be more vicious than the people who tried to kill us. If he wants to take the treasures, he can kill us both as easily as killing chickens. "Ah, no way, Little Orange. He doesn't look like that kind of person. I feel safe when I see him." Little Orange said in a trembling voice, "It's better not to tell him." The more he said, the weaker his voice became. Ouch. Nya Chinyu suddenly thought of something and said, "Oh right, when you took the box from the bad guy, was he also there? Or did you take it before he came?" Hearing Nya Chinyu's question, Little Orange's face suddenly became hot. His heart was beating fast. He said carefully, "No, I took it before he came." "Oh, that's good, that's good." Nye Qinyu seemed to be patting her chest with her left hand. She smiled and said, "Since he didn't see it, I didn't lie to him. He won't ask anyway, right?" "Yes." Little Orange answered vaguely. It was already late at night. There was no moonlight outside the window. It was dark outside. It was a good time to sleep. However, the sound of tossing and turning could be heard in the dark room. It was the same sleepless night. It was the same aftertaste. The only difference was their mood. That tall and thin figure with superhuman abilities. That long sword in his hand was shining brightly, cleansing the world of filth. He was right in front of me, showing off his power. Although his eyes were a little small, they were bright. His nose was a little flat, but it looked good. His ears were a little small, but they were pleasing to the eye. His face looked young, but he had a mature aura. Every word he said had the charm of a game. Could it be that he flew here on a seven-colored cloud? He is my hero? In the room next door, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know that his image in the hearts of the two girls was becoming more and more perfect. He just closed his eyes and meditated, slowly understanding the endless way of heaven. Only when it was close to midnight did he take out the primeval stones from his bosom and began to circulate the Carefree Heart Sutra to cultivate the Heart Sutra. The next morning, Zhang Xiaohua had just practiced the Fist of the North Star 9 times. He wanted to understand the 108 moves and see if he could perform them in reverse. However, he heard footsteps behind him. Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly as he stood in the middle of the courtyard. The door opened with a creaking sound. Nye Qinyu and Little Orange walked out with dark circles under their eyes. Their eyes were bloodshot. They looked dispirited. Zhang Xiaohua saw this and asked with a smile, "Miss Nye, why are you so tired? Did you not sleep well last night? Why is Little Orange like this too?" Looking at the ordinary smiling face that had appeared countless times in her dreams last night, Nye Qinyu suddenly didn't know what to say. On the other hand, Little Orange held her young lady's arm and said, "Sigh, the sudden change of environment is very uncomfortable. At night, I have nightmares. A cat is catching a mouse. The mouse keeps swaying in front of me, but I can't get caught by the cat. Don't you think so? Mississippi, oh, that's right. That cat is so stupid." Zhang Xiaohua pinched his nose and said with a smile, "So you two actually had the same dream. What a deep relationship between master and servant." Seeing that the two girls were a little embarrassed, Zhang Xiaohua changed the topic and said, "Please wait a moment. I'll go to the front of the inn to get some food. You two can eat first. I'll go to the city to see if the Fushun escort agency is interested in this escort." "Ren, Hero Ren, you really can't escort us?" Nye Qinyu still didn't give up and looked at him expectantly. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and turned to leave the courtyard. Not long after, he brought the food into the room. Zhang Xiaohua asked, "By the way, Miss Nye, where are you going?" Nye Qinyu thought for a while and said, "Rejuvenation Valley." Then, she carefully observed Zhang Xiaohua's reaction. Unfortunately, Zhang Xiaohua's reaction disappointed her. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Miss Nye, Rejuvenation Valley is the valley where your house is, right? You have to tell me where it is. Otherwise, how am I going to tell the escort agency?" -3. Chapter 361. Carefree City. Nye Qinyu had no choice but to name the place. Then, he said, "Hero Ren, I've never told you the name and location of our villa because I have my own difficulties. I hope you can be magnanimous and forgive me." Zhang Xiaohua felt strange and asked, "Miss Nye, why do you think I'm unhappy? I haven't told you where I'm going either. Everyone has their own privacy. I don't have the time to meddle in other people's business. Besides, we're going to part ways soon. What can I do even if I'm angry with you?" Nye Qinyu's face turned pale and tears welled up in her eyes. Zhang Xiaohua felt strange about Nye Qinyu's reaction. However, he had no time to coax her. He turned around and walked out of the house. But when he stepped out of the house, he paused for a moment. He said, "Miss Nye, you called me Hero Run. Hero Run, I feel very awkward. If possible, let's call me Hero Run. What do you think?" Well, okay. Okay. Nye Chinyu nodded like a chick pecking rice and said, I'll listen to you. Hero Run. No, Brother Rin. Her face, which had been gloomy just now, immediately turned sunny. She smiled through her tears. Xiao Orange, who was beside her, looked very unnatural. Fushun Escort Agency was some distance away from the inn. Zhang Xiaohua did not ride the David's deer. He just strolled around casually and checked if there were any Jianghu people who looked strange. Tanha City was a very big town, not inferior to Pingyang City in any way. There were many people coming and going in the city, and there were also people of the pugilistic world who held swords and sabers. However, they seemed to be in a hurry and did not look around. They were probably not Nye Qianyu's enemies. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua was relieved. He walked slowly because he wanted to draw their attention to the road ahead. It seemed that this method was working. In fact, he killed those people yesterday to warn them and let them see his strength. If they knew what was good for them, they might give up the search for Nye Qianyu. Of course, this situation was almost negligible. The second purpose was to confuse them and make them think that Nye Qianyu had turned back from the original path to look for help. In this way, Nye Qianyu and Xiao Orange would be escorted to Carefree City by the bodyguards of the escort agency. The risk would be reduced. In fact, man proposes, God disposes. Zhang Xiaohua was just doing his best. If nothing happened to him, it would not be difficult to send the two of them to Rejuvenation Valley. Fushun Escort Agency's entrance was huge, more than twice the size of Lotus Escort Agency in Pingyang City. One look, and one could tell that it was the kind that was more powerful. Two stone-carved lions stepped on embroidered balls and glared fiercely. However, the entrance of the escort agency was wide open. There were merchants coming and going from time to time, but there were no guards at the entrance. This made Zhang Xiaohua feel a little strange. Could it be that the rules of Tanha City were different from those of Pingyang City? She remembered that the guards of Lotus Escort Agency were guarding the entrance when the door was opened. Firstly, they could greet the guests, and secondly, they could show the strength of the escort agency. Did Fushun Escort Agency not need this? Following a few people into the escort agency, Zhang Xiaohua took a look. The layout was exactly the same as that of Lotus Escort Agency. In front of her was an incomparably huge public square. In the corner were weapons, stone locks, and other objects. Early in the morning, there were also a few men practicing martial arts diligently. Seeing this familiar scene, Zhang Xiaohua smiled. Although the days of recuperation at Lotus Escort Agency were dull and painful, they were also unusually heartwarming. Then, Zhang Xiaohua familiarly walked towards a large hall on the right side of the entrance. In her impression, that was the place where Lotus Escort Agency received business. In fact, there was no need to ask further. There were already a few people in front of her walking in that direction. Turning around a projector wall, before Zhang Xiaohua could get close, she heard an anxious and loud voice saying, "Chief Escort Liu, you must make a decision for me. You have already agreed to the conditions earlier. Why did you suddenly change it today? If this batch of goods of mine can't be escorted to Swallow Creek Town in time, I will lose a lot of money." Another loud and clear voice sounded, "Shopkeeper Mo, it's not that I don't want to help you. We have been doing business for more than 10 years. If it weren't for the special circumstances, how could I not do business with you? Our escort agency had already issued a notice 3 days ago. Fushun Escort Agency will temporarily stop doing business in the direction of Vow City." "Shopkeeper Mo, did you not notice?" "Io, that's right. I have been preparing my goods these past few days. How could I have the leisure to consider other things? Besides, your esteemed escort agency has never delayed my matters. I simply didn't think that there would be a problem at your most reliable link. AI, my apologies, my apologies. Shopkeeper Mo, you should think of another way first. After this period of time, I will pay you a visit to apologize." "Forget it. Let's not talk about apologizing. I'll hurry and find a few guards who know how to fight. Let's send my goods over first before we talk about anything else." "Oh, that's right. Chief Escort Liu, what exactly happened that made your esteemed escort agency make such a decision? Did something happen on the way to Vow City?" "Ha ha ha, Shopkeeper Mo, don't ask so much about this matter. These are all matters of the Jianghu. It's not good for you to know too much. In any case, I don't think anything will happen if you ask the guards to deliver your goods. You should hurry up and do what you need to do. When Zhang Xiaohua walked into the hall, a short and fat old man with white hair and beard was panting as he ran out of the hall. As he walked, he said, "All right, Chief Escort Liu. If something like this happens in the future, please inform me as soon as possible." Zhang Xiaohua looked up and saw that there were many people in the hall. Just then, a hale and hearty old man with a red face replied in a loud and clear voice, "All right, shopkeeper Mo. This Liu will remember." At this moment, another person beside him asked, "Chief Escort Liu, it's fine if you don't escort shopkeeper Mo's goods. But my daughter just wants to go to Vow City to spend the new year with her aunt. She's a living person, so I don't feel comfortable asking her to be a guard. Can't you assign 2 bodyguards?" Chief Escort Liu looked at him and said with a wry smile, "Scholarly, you are also a scholar. This humble one has made it very clear in the notice. Not only goods, but even if you want to protect people, our escort agency won't accept them. Especially women. We won't send anyone." How preposterous! Which escort agency in the world has such rules? Scholarly turned around and left in a huff. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat when she heard that. Her brows were already furrowed. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? She wanted Fu Shun Escort Agency to escort Nye Qianyu and Little Orange to Vow City. Oh, Fu Shun Escort Agency issued a notice saying that they wouldn't accept any goods or people in the direction of Vow City. Needless to say, this must be the good deed of those people who were after Nye Qianyu. What kind of treasure was in that brocade box in Nye Qianyu's hand? Why did they put in so much effort? Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel curious. At this moment, another one-eyed man asked in a low voice, "Chief Escort Liu, the notice also seems to state that all red goods entrusted to your escort agency must be inspected first. Is this true?" Chief Escort Liu nodded solemnly and said, "I know this is against the rules of the escort agency, but this humble one really has some difficulties that I can't disclose. Please understand. Also, I'm sure everyone knows that the other 2 escort agencies have issued similar notices. Therefore, if everyone can't agree with these rules of our escort agency, then please find someone else. If you are willing to be escorted by our escort agency, then please follow the notice." The one-eyed man said, "My item isn't going to Vow City, so there's no need to inspect it." Chief Escort Liu replied, "I'm sorry, if it's not going to Vow City, Fu Shun Escort Agency can naturally escort it, but it must be inspected. Even if we are escorting people, we still have to see their faces first." "Oh, Chief Escort Liu, now that you mention it, I really do remember. Other than the East City Gate, which is the same as usual, the other 3 city gates seem to be." A few others also shouted, "Yes, now that you mention it, I really do remember. It seems like 3 days ago. There were a few Jianghu people with swords and sabers guarding outside the city gates. It's been a few days now, and I thought it was strange at that time." "That's right. Chief Escort Liu, what's going on? Did something happen?" Chief Escort Liu stroked his beard and said with a smile, "It's nothing. I dare to guarantee with my life that even if something happens, it has nothing to do with you. The notice from Fu Shun Escort Agency is probably only temporary, and it will return to normal in a few days. If you're not in a hurry, you can come back in a few days to take a look, and perhaps you can escort it according to your wishes." Chief Escort Liu cupped his hands in salute and walked out of the hall. Those who were not in a hurry, or those who were really unwilling to be inspected by the escort agency, such as the one-eyed man, left first. Only a few bodyguards who were in a hurry and could accept the harsh conditions stayed behind to be taken care of by the other escorts. What about Zhang Xiaohua? The bodyguard he wanted Fu Shun Escort Agency to protect was precisely the one they wanted to inspect, so he naturally followed the others out. However, as he walked, he released his divine sense to follow Chief Escort Liu. Chief Escort Liu exited the main hall and walked towards the backyard. After passing through several courtyards, he arrived at an elegant room. A scholarly middle-aged scholar was tasting food in the room. When he saw Chief Escort Liu return, he stood up with a smile and went up to greet him. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua looked around and walked to the side of a screen wall. With a twist of her body, she immediately disappeared. When she reappeared, she was outside the elegant room. Zhang Xiaohua poked her head out to look around. She exerted force with her legs, and her body floated up like cotton wool and landed on the elegant room. She pricked up her ears and began to eavesdrop. -3. Chapter 362. The scribe said, Chief Escort Lu, we will have to trouble you. However, this is only a temporary measure and will be rescinded in a few days. We will be responsible for all the losses of your escort agency. Chief Escort Lu cupped his hands and said, Commander Zhou is too polite. Elder Shi of your esteemed sect is my savior. If I don't help out with such a small matter, wouldn't I be worse than a pig or a dog? Don't mention this compensation again. However, Commander Zhou disagreed and said, Chief Escort Lu, you're wrong. Your friendship with Elder Shi is one thing, but we're already very happy that you're willing to help us with this big favor for Elder Shi's sake. This will delay the escort agency's business, but it's a matter of official business. We can't let private matters affect official business. Moreover, this is also my sect leader's intention, so please don't decline. Otherwise, when I return to the sect, how will I explain this to Elder Shi? I can't let Elder Shi laugh at me for taking advantage of others because of him. Ha ha ha. Chief Escort Lu laughed loudly and said, If that's the case, then I won't stand on ceremony. Thank you for your sect master's kindness. Commander Zhou also laughed and said, Likewise, I still have to thank Chief Escort Lu for your kindness. The two drank tea for a while, then Chief Escort Lu asked, Commander Zhou, it's already the 4th day, and we still haven't seen the person or thing you mentioned. I presume they're no longer in Tanha City. Perhaps. Some of the sect's brothers have already followed the path down, but there hasn't been any news back yet. Hall Master Chiu also returned to the sect yesterday to report the completion of the mission. Looking at the situation along the way, there's an 80 to 90% chance that they've already been picked up by their experts. Chief Escort Lu asked with interest, Commander Zhou, what are you looking for, and who are you looking for? Can you tell me a little? Commander Zhou laughed and said, This isn't Chief Escort Lu's style. You haven't asked me about it for 3 days, so why are you asking again today? Aren't you making things difficult for me? Chief Escort Lu chuckled and said, Aren't people always curious? Ah, curiosity killed the cat. Chief Escort Lu, it's better if you don't know what you shouldn't know. It's not that I don't want to tell you, but it'll really kill you if I tell you. Chief Escort Lu was dumbfounded. He quickly said, Then it's better if Commander Zhou doesn't say anything. Then, he changed the topic and talked about something else. Zhang Xiaohua was bored and was about to leave when she heard Chief Escort Lu ask again, How is Elder Shi doing in your sect? I haven't seen him for many years. How did he join your esteemed sect? That's right, your sect doesn't seem to have a great reputation. I've been in Jianghu for most of my life, so why? Why haven't I heard of it? Hee. Chief Escort Lu laughed and said, That's right, I really haven't heard of it. However, since Elder Shi was able to join your sect, you must be from a prestigious sect, right? A prestigious sect? Commander Zhou sneered and said, How can a prestigious sect be compared to us? I'm not afraid to tell you that if it weren't for Elder Shi's personal relationship with the sect leader, with Elder Shi's skills, he might not have been able to occupy the position of the last elder in our sect. Chief Escort Lu was shocked. He had always thought that his savior was an important figure in this sect, so he had been neglectful in front of this scholar a few days ago. Now that he knew that the person he thought was his backer might not even be in his eyes, the expression on his face immediately became more respectful. Then your esteemed sect. Chief Escort Lu seemed to want to ask something more. Zhang Xiaohua also pricked up her ears outside, wanting to know what kind of powerful sect this was. At this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps could be heard from outside. Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly curled up her body and heard a person running in hurriedly. He first cupped his hands in salute to Chief Escort Lu, then moved closer to Commander Zhou's ear and whispered a few words. Commander Zhou's expression changed drastically. He stood up from his chair with a bang and shouted in disbelief, What did you say? Hall Master Chiu and his party of 5 were killed at the outskirts of the East Gate? This Commander Zhou's ability to remain calm was actually worse than the person who reported the news. Chief Escort Lu, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but feel a little disdainful. How could such an uncultured scholar be a commander? However, Chief Escort Liu underestimated him too much. Chief Escort Liu and the person who reported the news didn't know the extent of Hall Master Chio's martial arts. Even if they knew that his martial arts were superb, they wouldn't know to what extent. Commander Zhou, on the other hand, knew Hall Master Chio's background like the back of his hand. He deeply knew that Hall Master Chio was a capable subordinate that his sect master had secretly nurtured. Although his martial arts were superb, he had never made a name for himself in the Jianghu. If he were in the Jianghu, he would definitely be the kind that could cause huge waves. His reputation might not be any worse than the current Righteous Alliance's deputy alliance masters who were currently flourishing. And yet, such a formidable figure had actually been beaten to a pulp at the outskirts of Tanha City's East Gate. He couldn't be more dead. 5 people had actually died in the same way. Not a single one of them had escaped. Even the 5 horses had been kicked to death. This was simply something that he had never dreamt of. Where did Rejuvenation Valley find such a formidable helper? After hearing such shocking news, how could he still sit there calmly? Naturally, his previous self-restraint had long been tossed beyond the highest heavens. Commander Zhou couldn't be bothered to look at the 2 people's astonished gazes. He then slapped his head and said, I've fallen for the enemy's diversionary tactic. Chief Escort Liu, this one needs to personally make a trip. Farewell, farewell. Then, he turned to the messenger and said, You, hurry and inform the brothers in the city to assemble fully armed at the East Gate. Release a carrier pigeon and inform the brothers who went south to send a portion of them over. Tell them that Rejuvenation Valley's men are hiding in Tanha City and have now turned back. Ask them to hurry and provide support. Oh right, also inform Sect Master to send an elder-level expert over. We'll attack them from the front and back. Let's see where they can escape. When he finished speaking, he hurriedly left with the messenger. Chief Escort Liu followed him out of the elegant room, muttering as he walked, How did we get into a conflict with Rejuvenation Valley? Really? I was wondering why we didn't send the bodyguard to Macho City. I forgot to ask him if that notice has been withdrawn. Then, he shook his head and said, It's better not to withdraw it yet. When immortals fight, don't involve mortals. Someone will compensate me for my losses anyway. What's the hurry? Zhang Xiaohua was lying on the roof of the elegant room. When she heard these words, she was so angry that she almost released a flying sword from the roof to hack this guy to death. Nonsense, you're not in a hurry, but I am. When Chief Escort Liu left, Zhang Xiaohua also floated down from the roof and disappeared with a twist of her body. She only emerged from the ground after she had used Earth Escape to a secluded place. She was filled with regret. What was all this? The escort agency didn't have any bodyguards. How was she going to get rid of this burden? But now wasn't the time to get rid of this burden. Commander Zhou had fallen for her diversion tactic and had mobilized all the men in the city to the main road at the East Gate. When she thought of this, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but shake her head and wag her tail. Her quick-witted idea at that time had actually been seen as a well-thought-out stratagem. How could she not feel proud? Right now, the most important thing for Nie Qinyu and Little Orange was to leave Tanha City first. Of course, they didn't have to consider the east and south gates. They could only leave through the west and north gates first. Moreover, they'd heard from Commander Zhou just now that the brothers in the city probably included the men guarding the 3 city gates. If they didn't leave now, when Commander Zhou reacted and sent people to guard the gates, they would certainly be able to kill them. However, wouldn't that be beating the grass and alerting the snake? How could she do this kind of work that didn't require any skill? After thinking about it, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly inquired about the address of the carriage company and found a shop nearby. Without bargaining, she found a medium-sized carriage and a good horse and bought them together. Fortunately, Nie Qinyu had just given her a small purse. Otherwise, our hero Zhang would have to pay for it himself. Zhang Xiaohua drove the carriage back to the small courtyard of the inn. Nie Qinyu and Little Orange looked at each other with bitter faces. When they saw Zhang Xiaohua driving the carriage back, their faces immediately changed. Zhang Xiaohua didn't explain and said, Hurry up and pack your things. Move everything in the small carriage to the new carriage. I'll give you the time to drink a cup of tea." After saying that, she didn't look at the two's faces and hurriedly went to the inn to find the shopkeeper to settle the bill. When she came back after settling the bill, Little Orange had already packed everything and was standing in front of the carriage waiting for her. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised and asked, "Where's Miss Nye?" Little Orange looked at the carriage and said, "There, she's in the carriage." Zhang Xiaohua laughed and said, "Hee hee, she ran quite fast. What about you? Why don't you get in the carriage?" Looking at the martial arts master in front of her who she used to think was a country bumpkin, Little Orange was speechless and only said, You really don't intend to send us off?" Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and said, "Yes, I really don't intend to send you off. Hurry up and get in the carriage." Little Orange bit her lips and bowed to him. She said, "Then, I'll thank you on behalf of Miss Nye for saving our lives. The world is big and the world is full of vicissitudes. I don't know when we'll meet again. Brother Ren, I hope you." Hearing Little Orange's words, Zhang Xiaohua almost laughed out loud. He only kept a straight face and interrupted her and said, "Okay, I know. Hurry up and get in the carriage." Little Orange's unfinished words were choked back by Zhang Xiaohua. She had no choice but to get into the carriage, put down the curtain, and stop talking. Zhang Xiaohua led Huan Huan over from the side and patted its head, indicating for it to follow the carriage. She jumped into the carriage and drove towards the west gate without saying anything. She didn't say anything along the way. When they got close to the west gate, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly released her divine sense. As expected, she didn't see any Jianghu people holding swords outside the city. Only then did she feel relieved and leisurely drove the carriage out of the city. But what about after leaving the city? Zhang Xiaohua muttered in her heart. If she didn't find any bodyguards, who would send these two to Carefree City? -3. Chapter 363. The carriage gradually moved forward. A black horse was pulling the carriage, and the bell on its neck jingled. The sound was exceptionally crisp on the road. Nye Qinyu and Little Orange, who were in the carriage, were in a bad mood. They didn't say anything and were too lazy to pay attention to everything outside the carriage. They knew that after a while, the young man who was holding a long sword and leaping into the air would ride his David's deer and part ways with them. In this vast sea of people, they didn't know when they would meet again. They even faintly felt that this mysterious young man might not say goodbye to them when he left. Yes, goodbye, goodbye. It was a simple sentence, but it was filled with deep expectations. Sure enough, after the time of 2 meals, the curtain of the carriage hadn't been pulled open. The interior of the carriage was dusky. From time to time, light would penetrate through the gaps of the carriage, sweeping across the two's tightly stiff little faces. He really did leave. He left without saying goodbye. The two of them thought at the same time. However, when the crisp sound of the bell rang, it was like a deafening bell. Both of their delicate bodies trembled violently. Their gazes collided in the dusky carriage, and both of them were filled with surprise and disbelief. Almost at the same time, they whispered, "Why didn't I hear him talking to the bodyguard? Why are we outside the city?" Right now, it was quiet outside the carriage. Even the occasional sound was soft. Where was the impetuosity unique to Tanha City? If that bell was in the city, how could it have such a heavenly sound? The two of them seemed to have woken up from a dream and rushed to pull open the curtain in front. Wasn't the shoulder that wasn't very broad, the back view that had been deeply engraved in their hearts, right in front of them? Little Orange rushed to say, "Ren Xiaoyao, why didn't you leave?" Nye Qinyu also asked, "Big Brother Ren, why didn't you send us to the escort agency? Why did you send us out of the city? Where is this place?" Zhang Xiaohua turned her head to look at the two girls who were overjoyed. Her heart also felt warm. It felt good to be protected by someone, not to mention a man who could protect a girl. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua truly felt like an adult. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "This is the west gate of Tanha City. We are already some distance away from Tanha City. What are you two doing? Are you afraid of running into bad guys? Are you hiding inside and not daring to come out?" The two of them nodded tacitly and said, "That's right. If we're discovered in the city, we won't be able to escape. There's no need for that now. They've all gone to the east gate and are chasing after you on the way we came. No one should be able to discover you for the time being. Oh, Little Orange didn't quite understand. Oh, Nye Chinyu instantly smiled and said, so it was planned by Big Brother Rin. I really admire you. Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. Miss Nye thinks too highly of me. I just casually killed a few bad guys. How could I think so far ahead? Haha, Big Brother Rin is too modest. Nye Chinyu was not stingy with her words. Little Orange was puzzled and said, Young Master Run, I still don't understand. Why didn't you send us to the escort agency? Hearing Little Orange calling herself Young Master and calling herself a maid, Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly and explained, Little Orange, do you think I didn't want to send you to the escort agency? But even if I wanted to, they wouldn't dare to accept this mission. Little Orange was curious and asked, Why is that, Young Master Run? Nye Chinyu smiled and said, I see. This smile was very sweet. Miss Nye, you're really smart and very impressive. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but praise her. Nye Chinyu waved her hands and said, It's useless to be smart. In front of Big Brother Ren's powerful martial arts, any little trick is just a small trick. At this moment, Little Orange also understood. Looking at her Mrs. excited face, her expression changed slightly. Then, she immediately returned to normal and said, Mrs. really amazing. I really admire you. Zhang Xiaohua told her about how she went to the escort agency to find bodyguards. Then, she shrugged and said, I didn't have a choice. I couldn't just watch you fall into the hands of the bad guys. Moreover, if those people returned and couldn't find you, they might return to Tanha City. I had no choice but to bring you out first. Sigh, it seems like we have to wait until we reach the next town. Hearing this, Nye Chinyu and Little Orange's expressions turned ugly. They looked at each other and Nye Chinyu asked, Big Brother Rin, can you tell me where you're going now? Zhang Xiaohua thought for a while and said, Miss Nye, can you tell me where Macho City is? Or do you know how to get to Macho City? Zhang Xiaohua didn't know where Macho City was, let alone how to get there. When he was at the escort agency, although he wanted to ask, he was afraid of attracting attention. However, this Miss Nye in front of him was only 12 years old. In his imagination, she might not know how to get there. Who would have thought that Nye Chinyu would only ponder for a moment before she explained the route from Tanha City to Carefree City, clearly without any hesitation? Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. The thought of, why is there such a big difference between people, flashed into his mind again. He thought about how he had only just found out how to get to Pingyang City. Look at this 12-year-old girl. TSK. She was so much better than him. However, immediately, a little person appeared in his mind and advised earnestly, Don't compare yourself with others, silly boy. You're the son of a farmer. Being simple is your true nature. Pooh. Zhang Xiaohua spat on the ground. He had Nye Chinyu's charm. He thought to himself, Do nobles and generals have guts? Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's behavior, the two people in the carriage were surprised. They thought in unison, Is this habit also contagious? From Nye Chinyu's explanation, Zhang Xiaohua found out that Macho City was south of Tanha City. It was about a month's journey away. The Pingyang City that he requested was southwest of Tanha City. It was still very far from Macho City. The two routes were completely separated at Tanha City. Of course, all roads led to U City, but the most comfortable official road was like this. If Zhang Xiaohua wanted to return to Pingyang City, he would have to go through the west gate of Tanha City. There was an official road that passed by several cities before reaching Pingyang City. This was also the route that Ji Xiaohua had drawn for him. If he wanted bodyguards to escort Nye Chinyu, he would have to go through the south gate of Tanha City. There was also an official road that led to Macho City. That was also the direction that the unknown gang was pursuing Nye Chinyu. Of course, Zhang Xiaohua still had a choice. In the first 10 days, there would be a famous escort company in a big city. It was not a bad idea to let them escort Nye Chinyu. However, this would delay Nye Chinyu's journey and take a lot of detours. Thinking of the detours, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly had a new idea. He stroked his chin and thought carefully about the possibilities. Behind him, Nye Chinyu and Little Orange saw that Zhang Xiaohua did not say anything after asking for the location of Macho City. They sat quietly in the carriage and looked at the passing scenery outside. However, they did not pay attention to anything. They only secretly prayed. Will he change his mind? Will he send us to Rejuvenation Valley? After a while, Zhang Xiaohua said, Miss Nye, I have an idea. Do you think it will work? Nye Qinyu asked curiously, Please speak, Brother Run. Actually, I originally planned to hire bodyguards to escort you two back to Macho City in Tanha City. However, I did not expect that Fu Shun Escort Company would not accept the escort to the south. Therefore, I have no choice but to place my hopes on the next city. However, I cannot guarantee that there will be a suitable escort company in the next city. Moreover, I am not sure if the escort company will be like Fu Shun Escort Company and not dare to accept this escort. Moreover, to hand you two over to unfamiliar bodyguards, I have decided that I can't bear it. Nonsense. You only realized it now. So you have been treating us like goods and letting people escort us. God has opened his eyes. You only realized it now. Nye Qinyu and Little Orange looked at each other. Their eyes were filled with joy and relief. Zhang Xiaohua continued to explain. The place I am going to is definitely not where you two can follow me. However, seeing Zhang Xiaohua dawdling, Little Orange became impatient and said, Can't you finish your sentence in one sentence? Nye Qinyu hurriedly pulled Little Orange's sleeve with her uninjured left hand and said, Little Orange, let Brotherin finish. Zhang Xiaohua chuckled and said, However, you two can follow me all the way there. After I am done with my business, I will send you back. How about that? Ah. Nye Qinyu and Little Orange could not believe their ears. Nye Qinyu hurriedly asked, Brother Ren, I have thought of this idea. However, the matter you are going to do must be extremely confidential and important. It will probably cause a sensation in the martial arts world. If we follow you, won't we affect you? That's why I don't dare to say it. Zhang Xiaohua scratched the few strands of mustache on his chin with his fingers and said with a smile, It's fine. As long as you don't have to follow me when you reach a place. When I'm done, I'll meet you at that place and send you off. Oh yes, Miss Nye, are you in a hurry to go back to Macho City? Nye Qinyu smiled and said, Even if we are in a hurry, we need to be alive to go back. The place Brother Run is going to is definitely not in the same direction as Macho City. It might even be very far away. The further we go, the harder it will be for those bad guys to find us. Brother Ren, you are so smart. What a brilliant plan. You can achieve 2 goals with 1 stroke. I admire you. After hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua raised his invisible tail high. He was just short of a feather fan to show the elegance of a wise man. Sigh. Actually, as long as people get along with each other, it is inevitable that they will want to protect each other, let alone 2 budding girls. Since Zhang Xiaohua had the ability to send the 2 girls home after visiting the Guozhuang house as a man, how could he refuse such a cushy task? Everything was caused by male chauvinism. -3. Chapter 364. Faint snowflakes drifted down like salt grains, covering the mountains and rivers, and even dyeing the boundless fields white. A thin layer of snow had already accumulated on the straight and wide road. The road was slippery in the snow, and there were very few people on the road. At this time, there was a clear ding-ling sound, and a carriage came from afar. Pulling the carriage was an ordinary black horse, and there was nothing special about it. But what was strange was that the carriage didn't travel in the middle of the official road. In the middle of the road, parallel to the black horse pulling the carriage, there was a glossy and spirited mule. On the carriage pulled by the black horse sat a skinny young man. His eyes were closed as he rested. His hands were in an extremely mysterious position. It seemed that he had already fallen asleep. Everything seemed so normal. However, if one were to pay close attention, one would be able to clearly see that although the snowflakes that filled the sky and became bigger and bigger stained everything, they did not seem to disturb the young man's beautiful dream at all. This was because there seemed to be a transparent cover around the young man's body. When the snowflakes landed on his body, it was as if they had landed on an abnormally smooth surface. They could not stay there and would slide to the side. Therefore, the snowflakes that filled the sky could not leave a single mark on the young man's body. Right at this moment, a soft and clear voice sounded out. Big Brother Ren, the snow is getting heavier and heavier. Aren't you going to take shelter in the carriage? Wasn't it Nye Qinyu's voice? The three people in the carriage were none other than Zhang Xiaohua, Nye Qinyu, and Little Orange, who had come out of Tanha City. Upon hearing the voice, Zhang Xiaohua opened his eyes, loosened his hands, and released his divine sense. Immediately, a faint smile appeared on his face. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua was different from before. Although he had not seen him for more than a month, his youthful face seemed to have matured a lot. His smile also had a mature charm. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "Little fishy, it's okay. I like to see the scene of snow staining the earth. This snow can make me think of vitality and hibernation. Why don't you come out and have a look?" Big Brother Ren, I've said it hundreds of times. Don't call me Little Fishy. My name is Little You. Really? Nye Qinyu's reproachful words came from the carriage. Zhang Xiaohua raised his eyebrows and said, "You two, one is Little Orange, and the other is Little Fishy. Aren't you a good match? Luckily, I'm smart enough to think of such a good name. Little Fishy, aren't you going to give me more money for the name?" "Bah!" Nye Qinyu spat and said, "Shameless." Another voice sounded, "Miss, I think you'd better take out those few golden leaves, lest young Master Run keeps thinking about them." "What?" "The food and drink expenses along the way, the hotel expenses, and Huan's expenses. Which one of them didn't use my money? How can he have the nerve to say that?" "Ha ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua felt very refreshed when he heard this. Of course, he didn't spend a single cent of his own money and rushed over from Tanha City. How could he not be happy? Upon hearing Zhang Xiaohua's laughter, the people in the carriage also laughed. Nye Qinyu smiled and said, "Big Brother Ren, the sky is going to be dark soon and the snow is getting heavier. I'm afraid we won't be able to make it to the town." Nye Qinyu felt very strange. They had been traveling for more than a month. Zhang Xiaohua was unusually cautious and never spent the night in the wilderness. Even when he saw that it was still early, he stayed in an inn and didn't move forward. Logically speaking, with his superb martial arts, why would he be afraid of some petty thieves? However, since Zhang Xiaohua didn't explain, she didn't feel right to ask. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "It's okay. Pingyang City is about 4 to 5 miles ahead. If we speed up, we should be able to make it by the time the sky turns dark. We've already passed the first day of the new year on the road, and we'll have to pass the 5th day of the new year in Pingyang City." "Eh?" Nye Qinyu said in surprise, "Big Brother Ren, aren't you always bad at directions? How did you know that we're reaching Pingyang City today? It's all white outside the carriage. How can you tell?" Upon hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua only laughed and didn't explain. Nye Qinyu in the carriage also seemed to be used to it and didn't pursue the matter. Zhang Xiaohua shouted habitually, "Hiya!" The deer immediately swung its tail and hit the black horse's buttocks. The black horse's hooves tightened again, and it galloped forward quickly into the boundless snow. After Zhang Xiaohua left Tanha City, she told Nye Qinyu about her thoughts. Although Miss Nye was young, she was much more experienced than Zhang Xiaohua when she was the same age 5 years ago. She was also insightful about the ways of the world. How could she not quickly cozy up to Rinpochian? Naturally, she didn't have any objections. Wasn't it just a detour? Even if she had to go out to sea for a round, as long as she could return to Carefree City safely, she was willing to do so. Moreover, besides, there was another small thought. Hee, let's not expose other people's privacy. From Tanha City to Pingyang City, it was only a short curve in Xiaohua Scroll. Zhang Xiaohua drove the carriage for almost a month to pass through the few cities in between. Even the first day of the new year was spent hurriedly on the road. In the end, Zhang Xiaohua didn't return to Guozhuang House during the new year. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohua used the whip on the carriage to drive the black horse. However, after a long time, she got tired of it. Huan, the deer, was indeed the spirit beast that Zhang Xiaohua mentioned. It actually understood its master's thoughts and caught up with Zhang Xiaohua. It only stopped when it reached a fork in the road and waited for Zhang Xiaohua's instructions. Along the way, Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed and thanked Xiaohua even more in her heart. When Nye Qinyu and Little Orange saw that the deer was so intelligent, they were also very surprised and liked it. Both of them had reared the deer before and had a deep understanding of its diet. Nie Qinyu's carriage didn't lack money, so along the way, although Huan Huan was a little different from the Rejuvenation Valley's deer, it was also well-fed and shiny. It was no longer as ugly as it was in Songning Town. As for Nie Qinyu and Little Orange, after interacting with Zhang Xiaohua for more than a month, they went from being in awe and fear at the beginning to gradually getting to know him. They knew that this young man with powerful martial arts was not unapproachable and unapproachable. If his mysterious behavior and powerful martial arts were covered up, the Ren Xiaoyao in their eyes at the beginning was his true self. Speaking of mysterious behavior, Zhang Xiaohua had to sleep well every night. Even when sitting in the carriage, he had to close his eyes to rest. Sometimes, he was obviously terrible with directions, but sometimes he could point out the road ahead. Sometimes, he even had the feeling that he could foresee things ahead. This really puzzled Nie Qianyu. What annoyed Nie Qianyu the most was that this guy didn't even take out a single penny along the way. He always stretched out his hand to her to pay for everything. This wasn't the style of a martial arts hero. However, Nie Qianyu was also very gratified by the benefits brought about by this most annoying thing. From Tanha City to Pingyang City, they had encountered all kinds of bandits, robbers, and other evil deeds. However, at this time, the value of a martial arts man was fully displayed. This guy didn't care how many robbers there were in front of him. He just looked left and right and came over with his long sword. He randomly found an extremely thick tree or a huge rock. He took a deep breath and swung his sword down. No matter how thick the tree was or how hard the rock was, it would collapse at the touch of his sword. Then, Zhang Xiaohua leisurely got into the carriage while all the robbers were dumbfounded. He shouted, "Go!" and the black horse automatically drove away, leaving behind the admiring gazes of the robbers. Of course, there were also some who felt good about themselves because they had more people. Zhang Xiaohua didn't hold back. No matter how many people there were, she killed them all with one strike and then used the second strike. Nie Qianyu and Little Orange were starry-eyed when they thought of that. Then, they spat and laughed. This guy is really barbaric. At the same time, they hid in the carriage and covered their mouths. How much money would it take to hire such a brave and fierce bodyguard? It was a tiring but joyful journey for more than a month. Unknowingly, they were close to Pingyang City. Nie Qianyu was so smart. Ever since they left Tanha City, she didn't mention where they were going. She only followed Zhang Xiaohua's wishes. Occasionally, when Zhang Xiaohua couldn't make up her mind, she would raise her own opinions. Her tone didn't show any intention of inquiring about Zhang Xiaohua's destination. However, Nie Qianyu was very familiar with the distribution of each city. Zhang Xiaohua's route was also very clear. As early as more than 10 days ago, she already knew that Pingyang City was on her route. She just didn't know that this Pingyang City was Zhang Xiaohua's destination. 5 days ago, on the first day of the new year, the three of them spent it in a very small town. Zhang Xiaohua didn't mind. She hadn't spent time with her mother and father for many years. Although she really wanted to, she gave up the idea when she saw that it was still far away from home. She only felt a faint longing in her heart. However, Nie Qianyu was different. It seemed that she hadn't spent the new year outside since she was young. That night, her eyes were red and she didn't eat much. Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how to persuade her. She only comforted her and accompanied her silently. Fortunately, Little Orange took his young mistress out for a walk. When they returned, although Nie Qianyu's eyes and face were red, she was in a good mood. It was just that she kept glancing at Zhang Xiaohua. She even toasted Zhang Xiaohua with a few cups of wine on a simple table. -3. Chapter 365. Recalling how Nie Qianyu's eyes were as red as a rabbit's, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help smiling. It was true that the saying, every festive season, one would think twice of one's loved ones. Even though Nie Qianyu usually behaved like an adult, it was only at this moment that Zhang Xiaohua realized that she was just a little girl who had just turned 12. Zhang Xiaohua had given Nie Qianyu the name Little Fish that day. He had wanted to call her Little Rabbit, but there were no similar words in her name. Therefore, he could only take a step back and call her Little Yu as Little Fish. Anyway, it was Nie Qianyu who asked him to call her Little Fish. What did it have to do with Zhang Xiaohua? At first, Nie Qianyu was very happy, thinking that Zhang Xiaohua finally called her by her nickname. However, after listening carefully, she realized that it was not her imagination. Therefore, she clung to Zhang Xiaohua and begged him to change it. However, until now, didn't Zhang Xiaohua still call her little fish? Thinking of Nie Qinyu's red eyes, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but think of the occasion when he celebrated Nie Qinyu's birthday. Before the three of them entered Tanha City, they had told each other their ages. At that time, Nie Qinyu said that she was going to celebrate her 12th birthday in a month. At that time, Zhang Xiaohua only felt that this little girl who was not even 12 years old had more experience than him. He could not compare with her at all. However, on that day, he suddenly had this idea on a whim. After counting the days, wasn't it the little girl's 12th birthday? That day, when they passed by a rural town, Zhang Xiaohua saw that Nie Qinyu and Little Orange seemed to have forgotten about it. Therefore, he got off the car at the last minute and went to an inn to buy 12 red eggs for Nie Qinyu. Yes, I remember when I was in Guozhuang house, didn't my mother cook eggs for me on my birthday? Since today is Nie Qinyu's birthday, I naturally have to buy her boiled red eggs. This was also the only thing Zhang Xiaohua bought with her own money along the way. Thinking back to the time when he saw Nie Qinyu's face full of surprise and gratitude, Zhang Xiaohua felt happy in his heart. After all, the price of 12 copper coins was reduced to 11 copper coins by him, and he even won the little girl's laughter. How could he not be happy? That day, Nie Qinyu was tearing up while eating the eggs, as if the eggs were the most delicious thing in the world. Thinking of her teary eyes, Zhang Xiaohua curls her lips secretly. Eating 6 eggs at one time? Isn't she afraid of choking? No wonder her eyes turned red when she cried. It would be a pity if she wasn't called Little Rabbit. As Zhang Xiaohua thought of the interesting things that happened along the way, the silhouette of Pingyang City appeared in her vision. In the snowy twilight, Pingyang City was still as majestic as ever. However, the people had changed. Zhang Xiaohua's eyes couldn't help but turn red. Galloping into the city, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be careless. She found an inn in a more remote area of Pingyang City. It was the new year now, and the inn's business wasn't very good. Seeing that there were guests, the innkeeper was very happy. This was the first business of the new year, and they had booked an independent courtyard. According to the coachman, they were going to stay for a few more days. Naturally, the innkeeper was very attentive to them and tried his best to flatter the two ladies. However, after a while, seeing that the two ladies were following Zhang Xiaohua's lead, he realized that he had misjudged them. He immediately changed his attitude and walked towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the patience for this. She drove the carriage to the courtyard and left the odd beasts and the black horse in the care of the innkeeper. She unloaded the items from the carriage and put them in a room. She didn't need the innkeeper to find help. Seeing this, the innkeeper naturally knew what to do. He instructed the shop assistants to do what they were supposed to do and quickly left, so as not to disturb the three of them in the courtyard. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua had unloaded the items from the carriage, unlike in the past where she would leave everything in the carriage for the night in order to make it easier for them to travel in the morning, Nie Qinyu and Xiao Juzi's hearts skipped a beat. Could it be that Pingyang City is the place where he is going to do his business? Indeed, after Nie Qinyu and Xiao Juzi had finished packing and were waiting for their meal, Zhang Xiaohua pushed the door open and entered. She smiled and said, "It's the 5th day of the Lunar New Year now. I have already asked the inn to make dumplings for you. You must eat your fill later." Nie Qinyu stood up and asked, "Big Brother Ren, from what you said, it seems that you don't intend to eat with us later?" Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, "I still have something to do and will go out for a while. I may be back late tonight. You guys can eat by yourselves." "Back tonight? Big Brother Ren, are you going to do something?" Nie Qinyu asked anxiously. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and didn't answer. Nie Qinyu blinked and said, "Big Brother Ren, be careful." Zhang Xiaohua nodded and turned to leave the room. She walked into the snowy night in a few steps. 2 pairs of concerned eyes followed him from inside the house until his figure disappeared into the darkness. Nie Qinyu turned around and asked, "Xiao Juzi, do you think Big Brother Ren is going to do something tonight?" Xiao Juzi smiled and said, "Miss, how would I know? But seeing that he didn't answer you, it seems to be the case. But, from what he said, he will be back tonight. Does that mean that we can continue our journey to Carefree City tomorrow?" But since we can leave tomorrow, why should we unload the things in the carriage? Xiao Juzi smiled bitterly and said, we don't have to worry about these things. Miss, you just focus on eating dumplings. I heard that the dumplings in the north are different from those in Carefree City. You have to try more dumplings later. Nie Qinyu looked disappointed and murmured, no matter how delicious it is, can it be better than red eggs? If Zhang Xiaohua was here, she would definitely refute her. Of course, braised pork is better than red eggs. Unfortunately, he was on the way to Misty Mountain Villa and didn't know about Nie Qinyu's girlish feelings. Yes, Zhang Xiaohua was walking to Misty Mountain Villa. The sky had already darkened, and the snow continued to fall endlessly. It had already covered the sun, and now it was no different from the night. There were few people on the streets, and they were all wearing new clothes and hiding in their houses to enjoy the rare New Year's atmosphere. Zhang Xiaohua did not intend to use the levitation technique or the earth escape technique, because his thoughts were now very chaotic. He was somewhat anxious to see the Misty Mountain Villa and the Huanxi Mountain Villa, but he was also somewhat afraid. This kind of contradictory mood could only be slowly calmed down by walking in the empty streets and alleys and walking in the dark night. Zhang Xiaohua walked out of Pingyang City alone in the snow. The sky was also dark, and there weren't many people in the city. Even if there were people hurriedly passing by in the snow, they wouldn't pay too much attention to him. Otherwise, wouldn't it be shocking if he didn't have an umbrella in his hand and snow on his body? Walking on the even more spacious road outside the city, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly stopped. He seemed to have figured something out. He looked up at the dark night sky and the snowflakes that floated in from time to time. He turned back to look at the footprints he had left on the snow. They had already been covered by the rapidly falling snowflakes. He then looked at the snow-white road in front of him that didn't have any traces. Zhang Xiaohua's lips curled into a smile. I've walked on the road behind me and left traces, but they won't last long. What kind of thing in this world can last long? It's just a matter of time. I haven't walked on the road ahead. It's up to me to decide what kind of traces I want to leave. They can be the same as the footprints behind me, or... At the thought of this, Zhang Xiaohua floated up and used the levitation technique. He leaped into the air and flew forward like a deity. I can also be different from before and not leave any traces on the road. Without destruction, there can be no construction. This must be the case. The Misty School has long been on the decline in the pugilistic world. It's a miracle that it has survived for so many years. In the pugilistic world, survival of the fittest is the most realistic thing. It's normal that the three sects would join forces to destroy it. Moreover, the Dalan Temple and the incense cult actually allowed Hu Yuni to escape from Ethereal Peak with the descendants of the Misty School. This is an anomaly. Could it be that they let them go because they are all descendants of the immortal Tao? Or is there something else going on? The Misty School is now as broken as it can be. However, the foundation of Misty Heights is still there. It's just that it's been occupied by the Righteous Alliance. The two leaders of the Righteous Alliance have been crippled. I don't know what's going on now. They probably won't have any extra thoughts on Misty Heights. It's not impossible for the Misty School to rise again. If there is such a day, I believe the ethereal sect will prosper once again. However, sect leader O has committed suicide. The Misty School has lost its backbone. Only 3 of the 6 Misty Tigers are left. 2 of them have been crippled. Hu Yuni is also seriously injured, and his martial arts have been greatly reduced. The eldest disciple of the sect leader, Zhang Chengyue, has also committed suicide. Sigh, it's like a plate of loose sand now. Forget it. After I send little fishy home, I'll go to the incense cult and find second brother first. I'm also not a disciple of the Misty School. Why should I worry about this for no reason? Although Misty Heights was quite a distance away from Pingyang City, Zhang Xiaohua quickly arrived in front of the archway of Misty Heights with her levitation technique. Zhang Xiaohua stood in front of the straight road and couldn't help but think of the scene when she first came here. Sigh. Things remain the same, but people have changed. In the darkness, the smooth road was covered with white snow and reflected white light. Zhang Xiaohua sighed and walked up. It was as if she wanted to relive the feelings of that day. Zhang Xiaohua slowly walked towards the archway of Misty Heights and released her divine sense. Perhaps it was because it was the new year, or because it had been many years since the Misty School was destroyed, The Righteous Alliance's protection had already been lax. Tonight, there weren't any disciples of the Righteous Alliance guarding the archway. When Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense saw the two ancient words misty on the archway, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. -3. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.